Good afternoon. Yes, it's working. Welcome to all of you to this very important and timely event that will help all of us go through the tragic circumstances of July 15th of last year in Turkey, and what lessons have we learned, and a year after, where are we with this in the aftermath of this tragedy that for a moment at least put in doubt the survival of civilian rule in the Republic of Turkey. My name is Paolo von Schirach. I am the president of the Global Policy Institute, and on behalf of the Global Policy Institute and BAU International University, a very warm welcome to all of you. We have with us today a very distinguished panel of excellent experts and speakers, and indeed government representatives, in the case of His Excellency the Ambassador of Turkey, who was kind enough to accept our invitation to join us today. And we also have representatives for grassroots organizations from Turkey, including people who were sort of eyewitnesses, actually participated in the events. When I say participated, I don't mean it lightly. Tried to resist, and some of them paying with their lives, and some were wounded in the circumstances of the night of July 15, 2016. Just one quick reference, if I may, to the basic principle that I hope that regardless of differences of opinion in this room and elsewhere, we hopefully can agree upon. Let me just give you a quick Hollywood anecdote, not to make light of this, but because I think it's relevant in this context. There's an old movie of 1964 called 7 Days in May. Some of you may know about it, some of you may have seen it, which, to my knowledge, is one of the very few, if not the only, sort of fictitious renditions of an attempted coup d'etat in the United States of America, in which a rogue general tries to basically unseat the elected president because of sharp differences on foreign policy and security issues that apparently he had. The most critical scene of the movie is at the very end, when the president has a heated exchange with a rogue general, and he tells him, "You are an egomaniacal individual with a Napoleonic spirit, and you are a traitor." That's the key word. You are a traitor. You're trying to overthrow the civilian government. If you have differences of opinion about policy with me, you resign and you run for office. This is how we do things in the United States of America. Now, if that seems like a pretty obvious and self-explanatory truth that applies to the United States of America as a duly founded and democratic constitution in which we uphold the principle that the military is answerable to civilian power, why shouldn't this apply to every other country, and in particular to key NATO allies like Turkey? And I think that at least on this very principle, we should agree on the notion that that no kind of military intervention, direct or indirect, in the constitutional affairs of any modern republic is acceptable. And I hope that this is at the very least one key takeaway from something that, again, we may find sort of self-explanatory and something that doesn't need to be argued. But I think the events of last year prove that sometimes this needs to be argued. And indeed, many people, many Turkish citizens, paid with their lives in the attempt to protect this very basic and fundamental principle of civilian rule and respect for the Constitution. And with that, I would like to start the proceedings today and welcome our guests, starting with Ms. Bayramoglu. I hope I'm not mispronouncing your name too much, who will give us the opening remarks, and then this will be followed by His Excellency the Ambassador of Turkey and the other distinguished guests. Thank you.
Welcome, dear distinguished guests. 1 year ago today, I want to share my experience with you as a witness, but also as a journalist on what happened at that day. This is the first time in our history that we're fighting against an organization that doesn't even have a flag. Our police departments and our parliament was bombed during this event. So I just want you to shut your eyes for a minute and just think of this would have happened in your own home country. What you would feel or what you would go through is the thing that I would wonder. And I believe that it's not very different from the 9/11 effects. I was watching TV on 15th of July that night and my phone rang. My friend told me that they were the last person to actually cross the Bosphorus Bridge because the military staff had blocked the bridge. And I responded as that they might not be soldiers, that the security staff would have blocked the road. Then I remembered that he did his military duty and that he could have not been wrong on what he had shared with me. And he told me that there were tanks on top of the bridge, and that's when I realized that it was a coup. A military coup. And then everything was on the news, on TV, and then our Prime Minister has stated that this was just an event that started initially within a smaller group of the military. And there's a TV channel called TRT, which is a public TV channel. That was when we realized, when the TV spokesperson was telling us these events with fearful statements. And then one of the highly ranked generals came out and stated that this was not a military coup, so then we were relieved. But then what I was curious was President Erdogan. Where was he? In which condition was he in? We were all curious. I can't express enough how happy I felt when President Erdogan shared his views with us. I called my family and my friends and said, this is the time to go on the streets. There were transportational issues that night, obviously, so we did try the bus, taxis, or other transportation ways to get to the bridge, but we did eventually. My aim was to get to the TV station that I was working in and to prepare for going on live. But it was not possible because I couldn't pass to the European continent. Kısıklı is the place where President Erdogan resides, and by many struggles I've managed to reach to that destination. Our psychology, as you can imagine, was shook, but we also had to deal with the disinformation that we received from various press branches. Following that night, for 27 days, me and a few other people have stayed there overnight in front of President Erdogan's residence. I only slept about 2 hours because then I would get home, prepare, and go on for the next duty. And 1 month was basically, this was my life every day. Since when you look at Turkish history, there were 9 military interventions. Coups. Some of them were internal memorandums, some were actually successful on overthrowing the government, and some were what ended up in resignation of many government officials. But 15th of July last year has a very special place in history. I had a journalist friend from Netherlands, and they asked me how I felt about that specific day. And it was an answer that could not be fit in one sentence. 15th of July was a struggle of democracy before anything else. That was the day where the new Turkey has demolished the old Turkey. That was the day when people gathered to save the democracy and to start a union, to be a union. 15th of July also marked the young citizens that lived in Turkey that fought for their rights and for their freedom. There were 250 casualties, and we had 180 veterans. And when we went back and when we stopped taking over and staying overnight to protect and to protest, we have gathered with family and friends and decided to build the foundation that we have today. And this foundation has helped all the families who have lost their kids, their young ones, within this struggle, and the veterans out of this event. The aim of the establishment of this foundation was to build a bridge between the families and the people who had suffered from this event and made sure that they were taken care of for the aftermath of the psychology that they had. So we have psychologists who help us with this issue, and we have visited so far 1,400 family members of the casualties or the veterans that we had. When we make these visits, we make sure that we determine what the families need, and either this be economically or psychologically. And in order to talk about the 15th of July event and to inform our younger population, we do visit schools and have informative sessions. And we tried to take the kids of the families who've lost their parents in this event. We take them to sport events so that their psychology could be uplifted a little bit. And with these families, we also have regular meetings as well. We have gathered 121 journalists from 19 different countries, and we met with the veterans so that they can explain their perspective and what they saw that night. And of course, we have volunteered lawyers who are taking and helping us to solve the cases that are continuing presently. We are working with a group of people who are very sensitive and who are psychologically traumatized. And they are upset with the international press that there is not enough awareness of these families or the people who have lost their lives to fight for democracy. There was a foreign news agency who was trying to reach one of the families who has lost their loved one as a casualty, and the family did not accept the interview. They didn't want to talk to them. But of course, then again, I think this might have an effect in terms of the local press making news on the supporters of Erdogan and how they follow him blindsided, and this created problems for a lot of families because that's not how they felt. So I think the press did have misinformative factors and that it wasn't just. The people who have gone on the streets, who have fought for this cause, did not do this just to raise a political awareness or to protest. They did this to protect their right of being free. And I would like to thank the professors or the analysts or the media members who have fought for the word, the other. And I would also like to give this one important message for the people who still believe and support the democracy. Turkish Republic will always continue to fight for their freedom and for the democracy that they have. And everyone who lives on the land does not make any difference in ethnicity and is a part of the society. And we will make sure that this alliance does not end, and we will work hard and do anything we can to make that happen. And hence, I would like to thank Global Policy Institute and BAU International University for inviting us and for showing how sensible they are towards this matter. And I thank you all, distinguished guests, for listening to me.
Thank thank you very much for this vivid account of what happened on that night of July 15th, and indeed of the aftermath, and all the issues pertaining to the aftermath, the people, the casualties, the families, and the consequences that still linger, I guess, today, a year after. And now, without further ado, let me introduce our distinguished panelists here. And I would like to start certainly with His Excellency Ambassador of Turkey, who's been kind enough to join us today. And that will be followed by Ambassador Jeffrey, by Walid Phares, Vice President of BAU, Dr. Natali, and Burak Kuntay, who will put it all together for us.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished members of the press. I would like to thank you all for being here to participate in this important event. And at the outset, I would like to thank to BAU and GPI for organizing this important and timely event. I would also, at the outset, would like to pay tribute to those that have lost their lives on that tragic night on the 15th of July, and voice my appreciation and gratitude to those that have been wounded, some of them seriously, and the total number was over 2,000 in that regard. I hosted a dinner last night at my embassy, at my residence, and Ms. Bayramoglu was among the invitees. After listening to her, I feel that she should have somehow got hold of my speaking notes, at least part of it. So that will spare you at least listening to that portion of my speaking notes. Well, in order to understand better the 15th of July attack on Turkish democracy, I think we should concentrate not only on what happened that night, but we should also pay attention to actually how things happened and why that they happened actually. And maybe we should even concentrate more on that in order to understand fully the reasons behind the 15th of July terrorist attack on our democracy. As Ms. Bayramoglu has also mentioned, we have an unfortunate history of military coups in Turkey. 1916, 1963, 1970, 1980, 1997, and finally 2015. Of course, I'm not proud of that as a Turkish citizen and as someone who believes in the importance of preserving democracy. But that was unfortunately the case for the Turkish democracy. But the 2015 events on the 15th of July were much different than the previous coup attempts, some of them successful, as has been mentioned in that regard. I will just concentrate a while on the differences in that regard. First, the July 15th military coup attempt was outside the military chain of the Turkish armed forces. Second, civilians were killed indiscriminately during that night. Third, government institutions were attacked, they were targeted, they were bombed, resulting in a number of casualties. Fourth, there was an assassination attempt on the president's life, his family member's life, and the prime minister. Fifth, and I would like to underline this in particular, which is the most important distinction between the 15th of July terrorist coup attempt and the previous coup attempts in Turkey. On the 15th of July, those that have participated in the military coup took their orders not from their superior commanders, but from civilians. This is of utmost importance. So, 15th of July was not a military coup attempt. It was a terrorist attack on Turkish democracy, a terrorist attack against the democratically elected government of Turkey and the future of the Turkish state. Now, let's analyze each distinction under the topics that I have mentioned. Government institutions were bombed. As Ms. Bayramoglu has stated, she got the news when she was at home watching the TV. I was in my office in late afternoon, actually early hours of the afternoon of the 15th of July. I received a telephone call from one of the ministers from Turkey, and he told me that there are some unexpected developments in Istanbul, and namely on the Bosphorus Bridge. The bridge was cut off by tanks, and military personnel were positioned on the Bosphorus Bridge. I immediately tried to reach some generals that I knew from my previous positions in the government, and soon we realized that there is something going on actually. What we didn't know at the time was it was a terrorist coup attempt. We were thinking that it was somehow a new sort of military coup attempt against the Turkish democracy. I immediately get in touch with the White House, and I asked the White House to issue a statement of support with Turkish democracy, with the Turkish government, and with the Turkish state. I will dwell upon it at a later stage, but until the late afternoon, there were no statements from the White House in support of Turkish democracy. And that was the biggest disappointment that I have suffered that afternoon. Well, I mean, the members of the parliament got the news as well that a group in the Turkish military is trying to engage some sort of an action against the Turkish state. So all the political parties, members of all political parties, ruling party and opposition party, they gathered at the Turkish Grand National Assembly to voice their support for the Turkish democracy. And what happened? The F-16s, they bombed the Turkish parliament for 11 times. And the members of the parliament, they had to take shelter in order to secure their lives. And then the headquarters of the Turkish security forces, special forces, have been bombed again by F-16s. More than 40 police officers were killed only on that attack. Then police headquarters, Ankara police headquarters, were bombed as well, scores of times. Headquarters of the National Intelligence Agency was bombed again by attack helicopters. Headquarters of the Turkish Satellite Communications and Telecommunications Directorate was bombed. So that happened for the first time. We have not seen that in previous coup attempts in Turkey. Assassination attempt on the president and prime minister's life. President at that time, President Erdogan, he was on vacation in Marmaris, in a resort in Marmaris. And the coup plotters, they organized the special forces that are loyal to not the government, but to the Fethullah Gülen terrorist organization, carried out an attack on that resort, killed a number of security guards of President Erdogan, but President Erdogan himself, within a fraction of minutes, escaped from that attempt, and he flew to Istanbul in order to stand by with his people, with the Turkish people, against the coup plotters. And the most important thing that I have, the distinction that I have mentioned, coup plotters acting under the instructions of civilians. This is of utmost importance. The headquarters of the coup plotters were Akıncı Air Base in Ankara. Most of the airplanes and attack helicopters took off from that air base and carried out their attacks against the government institutions and the Turkish Grand National Assembly and so on and so forth. Two important civilians were captured in that air base. One of them, Adil Öksüz, she is a professor of theology in at the Sakarya University, along with a CEO of a Gülenist company. They were at the Akıncı Air Base during the entire time, and they were captured after the air base were again taken over by the forces loyal to the state. What is the importance of those two gentlemen? Adil Öksüz and the other gentleman, the CEO of the company, they have visited the United States for 10 times during the last couple of years. And they were in the United States last time between 11th and 13th of July, 2015, 2 days before the coup took place. They came here, they took instructions for the coup attempt, they went to Turkey, and they administered the conduct of the coup attempt in Turkey. This is of utmost importance in order to understand what really happened on the 15th of July 2015. 90% of the Turkish population believe that this coup attempt was planned, organized, and staged by the Fethullah Gülen terrorist organization, whose leader is residing in Pennsylvania, United States, since 1999. And what is Fethullah Gülen terrorist organization? I can explain you what it is in depth, but actually you can go to the WikiLeaks, type in Fethullah Gülen and US documents, and you will find several cables sent by US Embassy and US consulates throughout Turkey to the US authorities, as far as what Fethullah Gülen terrorist organization is, what they stand for, and what they were trying to do in Turkey. The Ambassador Jeffrey is here. He knows better than I do those cables, and he has a number of times informed the US authorities that actually this is a dangerous cult trying to infiltrate into the Turkish state structure, trying to get hold of the Turkish government institutions, and that it has a dark side, is forcefully recruiting people, forcefully collecting money from the people in order to finance its illegal activities, and so on and so forth. All those are in the cables of US Embassy and US Consulate. So no need to mention as an ambassador those points. I think the facts in that regard speak for themselves. Fethullah Gülen is residing in the United States since 1999. The Turkish government, following the military coup, deployed a request for his extradition to Turkey. We have given 84 boxes of files pertaining to his involvement in criminal activities prior to the 15th of July, and also facts pertaining to his involvement in the 2015 15th of July events, 16th to 15th of July events. The Attorney General's office is still working on that. No file has been brought up against Fethullah Gülen so far. He is still appearing on TV channels. He is writing articles on a number of US media outlets, accusing the government, claiming that he has nothing to do with the 2016 events, 15th of July events, and we were asked to do that. He is trying to present himself as a moderate Islamic clergy, self-exiled clergy in that regard. As of yesterday, he was on NPR, again, making the same claims. Well, I don't know you, but I have never seen a criminal accepting his guilt, provided that he is brought to the court of justice and he was forced to plea bargain. So he is going to keep on rejecting his involvement in the 2015 events. But if you look into the FETÖ organization, how it developed, how it infiltrated in the Turkish security structures, it started in 1966, more than 40 years ago. After 1980, that pace even got more important and more in-depth as far as their infiltration into the Turkish state structures. They first targeted the Turkish judiciary, then Turkish police forces, even my ministry. And I will just read out to you what he has instructed his followers to do. And it's on the YouTube. I mean, you can just watch it as well. He says to his followers, "You must move in the arteries of the system without anyone noticing your existence until you reach all the power centers. You must wait for the time when you are complete and conditions are ripe. You must wait until such time as you have gotten all the state power, until you have brought to your side all the power of the constitutional institutions in Turkey. Those words speak for themselves. And those are the words of Fethullah Gülen. And now he is claiming that he has nothing to do with the 15th of July events, and he was not engaged in any sort of criminal activity in Turkey in that regard. People in the United States are emphasizing the importance of independence of judiciary. You can rest assured that it is of utmost importance for us as well, independence of judiciary. But there is another important element as far as judiciary is concerned. That is the neutrality of judiciary. Because of the infiltration of the FETÖ members into the Turkish judiciary system, the Turkish judiciary lost its neutrality. Maybe some of you have followed the Ergenekon, Sledgehammer, and Balyoz and other cases brought forward against the Turkish military personnel, high-level Turkish military personnel. That was the most significant indication of the Turkish judiciary losing its neutrality. In a matter of days, evidences were fabricated, and judges and prosecutors loyal to the Fethullah Gülen terrorist organization, they just gave decisions for arrest and imprisonment of high-level generals. Even the chief of Turkish armed forces was imprisoned with the allegation that he was a member of an armed organization. After all, he was the chief of the Turkish commander of the Turkish armed forces, and accused of being a leader of an armed organization. So this is a clear indication in that regard. But, I mean, unfortunately, after the 15th of July, as mentioned by Ms. Bayramoglu, we have seen an unjust approach on the part of the Western countries on their approach to what happened on the 15th of July. And for that matter, in the United States, it was a particular disappointment for us. 2 days after the military coup attempt or terrorist coup attempt took place in Turkey, one of the headlines of articles in the New York Times was, "Followers of Erdogan are like sheep. They will follow whatever he says." Why? Because they took to the streets after the call of the president to defend their democracy and to defend their elected government. Is the just approach? Is the fair approach? That very night, when the military coup attempt or terrorist coup attempt in Turkey was taking place, one of the members of the US Congress, he tweeted a message. Of course, I responded very harshly. He said, "Finally, democracy could come up after this military coup attempt in Turkey." He was a democratically elected member of the US Congress, and he was expecting democracy to come out after a military coup in Turkey. So this is the approach in that regard. This is the basic reason why we are disappointed. We have deployed, as I have mentioned before, a request for the extradition of Fethullah Gülen to Turkey. It was not met so far. But at least, US authorities could have taken some measures in order to limit his activities in the United States. He is still giving orders to his followers in Turkey. He is threatening the government, he is insulting the president and the government officials in Turkey. If you read into the article that appeared on the NPR yesterday, you will understand what I mean in that regard. So we would have expected the United States and our Western allies to display more solidarity with Turkey, to understanding what we felt on that tragic night in Turkey, or what the importance of the stance of the Turkish people in Turkey on the 15th of July. I mean, the people, they took to the streets. They have lost 249 precious lives that night. They were bombed by the F-16s belonging to the Turkish state and thus to the Turkish public, Turkish people. They were bombed and attacked by Turkish helicopters, the helicopters of the Turkish armed forces. But yet, they did not give in. They stood by democracy. But now, we are being criticized for taking measures against those that were involved in the 15th of July terrorist coup attempt. Yes, we are taking measures. It's a self-defense on the part of the Turkish state. What were we expected to do? I will give you some facts in that regard if I still have time. Okay. $50,000 people have been arrested so far for being a direct part and parcel of the 15th of July terrorist coup attempt. 48,000 people were released under judicial supervision. Only 3 to 4% of the total Turkish public servants were dismissed their positions, and 34,000 of them, after proper investigations, were reinstated. Inquiry commissions were established in order to find out the truth in that regard as far as their involvement is concerned. But yet, the Turkish government is criticized for taking action in order to defend its democracy and in order to take necessary measures to make sure that that kind of a tragedy will not happen again, and the Turkish democracy will not be targeted again but by that terrorist organization. And we are criticized. How about Germany? After the reunification of Germany, 500,000 government officials and army members were dismissed. Why? Under the suspicion that they might keep on their loyalty to the German Secret Service. Just on a suspicion. Not a single East German officer or public servant attacked German citizens, attacked the German parliament, attacked police forces, headquarters, and so on and so forth. And none of them took weapons at their hands, but they were dismissed. Why? Because the German government decided to make sure that the unification of Germany will be successfully conducted and it's not going to be threatened. Only under suspicion. Around 100,000 people in East European countries, they were dismissed again from their government positions based on the same suspicion. No attack was conducted by them against the democracies of those countries. But yet, it was a precaution. In Turkey, the Turkish democracy came under direct attack by a terrorist organization. So what do you expect us to do? Not to take any precautions in that regard? Just let things go and wait for the next attack on the Turkish democracy? The key word is empathy in that regard. Make empathy with the Turkish public opinion. Make empathy with the Turkish state. This is what we are asking for in the United States and from other Western countries, for that matter. And the state of emergency. Turkey is criticized for declaring a state of emergency after the 15th of July event. When, after a terrorist coup attempt took place against the government and the state, 249 people lost their lives, more than 2,000 wounded, and we declared a state of emergency. And we are criticized. How about France? They just came under a terrorist attack. Not an attack on the state, not an attack on the French democracy, but an attack against the French people. And they declared a state of emergency, and they were not criticized. But we were criticized in that regard. This is selective morality. I'm terribly sorry for using this terminology, but it's a selective morality. You should understand what we suffered on the 15th of July, what the Turkish people have suffered on the 15th of July. The Turkish people should be praised. The Turkish government should be praised for the stance that they have taken against the coup plotters in that regard. And I will give you another figure. 87.4% of the Turkish people, they say that the state of emergency did not affect their daily lives. But Western media, the US media, keep on claiming that the state of emergency is disrupting the democratic life of the people in Turkey. But the people of Turkey in Turkey are not in the same opinion. So who you are going to defend in that regard? The Turkish people or the members of the Fethullah Gülen terrorist organization that is providing information to you in that regard, false information in that regard. And 91.9% of the people find the arrest and expulsion from the public services of individuals as part of investigations in the FETÖ are justified. 91.9%. It's a self-defense. We are trying to defend our democracy. We should be praised in that regard. 2 days after the military coup took place in Turkey, the Secretary of State of the United States, he delivered a speech. What did he say? He asked both parties to show restraint. Both parties. One of the parties is the Turkish state and the Turkish people trying to defend their democracy, and the other party is a terrorist organization. How can you treat them on an equal footing? And how can you expect the Turkish public opinion not to be disappointed with that? You know, the first time the terrorist coup attempt in Turkey was condemned by the US administration, by the then US administration, was 6 days after the military coup took place. Vice President Biden visited Turkey after 40 days following the terrorist coup attempt in Turkey. Not a single prime minister, foreign minister, or other government dignitary visited Turkey after the 15th of July events to show solidarity with Turkey. So we are disappointed. We need empathy. 15th of July was a terrorist attack on Turkish democracy, the future of the Turkish state, and the future of a state which is a close ally of the United States. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador, for a long, eloquent, and crisp analysis, not just of the events of July 15, 2016, but all the various implications, both domestic and international. And I think, yes, we can all agree with you, there is no such thing as a good coup or a bad coup. All coups are bad, all of them, and they should be universally condemned, unanimously, by all democracies and peace-loving countries, including the United States of America. Let me just point out that we have, and you may have seen it coming in, a virtual reality show, which is a rendition put together by Bahcesehir University students, actually, in Istanbul, which tries to give you a vivid reconstruction of the events of that fateful night, and in particular, the spontaneous uprising of the civilians that has been eloquently described by our two speakers so far against the riotous military plotters, or better said, as the ambassador put it, terrorist-led military plot or military action. So you can later, after the end of these proceedings, those of you who haven't seen it yet, I invite you to watch this gripping virtual reality rendition. I saw it myself yesterday. It's quite interesting and takes you. Now, without further ado, Ambassador Jeffrey, if you please would like to hear your remarks. For Ambassador Jeffrey is a good friend of ours and friend of many persons are in this room, and among other accomplishments in his career, he served as ambassador to Turkey from the United States after having served 3 prior tours of duty, if I'm not mistaken, while in Turkey during his long career. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Burak. Mr. Ambassador, Madam Bayramoglu, members of the audience, let me first thank GPI and BAU for putting this event on and giving us a chance to talk. I'll try to be very quick in my remarks because I want to get some thinking and some back and forth on this event of great importance. So let me start off with a set of what I think are facts. First of all, Turkey is very, very important to the United States and to global security. Therefore, when something like this happens in Turkey, we all have to pay close attention to it. Secondly, as you've heard, this was not a coup like the other coups generated by the US military. This was a coup using military officers by another organization, the Fethullah Gulen movement. That movement was behind this coup far as I think I or anybody else can objectively see. The overwhelming majority of the Turkish population believe that. There are whole rooms full of evidence, and there hasn't been an alternative argument of any significance that I've seen come up. So we have to look at, well, why is it so hard to convince people outside of Turkey of that? But I'll get to that in a second. Third thing is, as Madam Bayramoglu very eloquently explained to us, the Turkish people rose up united against this coup. And it was their actions in response to the call by the president that led to people stopping this thing in its tracks. And this is an extraordinary moment, not only in the history of Turkey, but frankly in the history of democracy anywhere. The next point, as the ambassador pointed out, this was met with a lot of confusion in Washington. And this confusion, at best, is embarrassing. At worst, casts a pall on the relationship. And it's understandable why many Turks question what Washington's motives were. I'll get to that in a second. But that's also a fact. And the final fact is that Turkey, like any country under circumstances like that, like us after 9/11, us after Pearl Harbor, is going to take very sweeping, broad measures to try to protect itself from a recurrence of this. And you can argue about the merits of that. America was much criticized for some of the things it did after 9/11, but it essentially is going to happen. And the question is how you move forward from that, and I'll come back to that in a second. That will be the second thing I'll talk about in a little more detail, but the first is the U.S. reaction. There was no malicious intent behind this. The United States has nothing to do with the coup. The United States didn't want to see a coup, nor did anybody in the United States in any position of authority hope for or basically in any way support the goals of the Gulenist movement or that actions of parts of the military on July 15th. Nonetheless, the reaction was slow. I was peripherally from the outside a bit involved in this, and the problem is twofold. One is the Obama administration was typically slow on everything. One who worked in the Obama administration for 4 years, believe me, don't take it personally, Turkey. There's a long list of countries behind you that have their own unhappiness, not always with the policies of the Obama administration, but the time it took for anybody to do anything. What they were trying to do was to check with everybody they could, inside and outside of government, to find out what was going on. And that was understandable because this is a very complex issue, and I'll come to that in a second. It gets to some of the problems inside Turkey and some of the problems that led to the coup. So that was the first problem. The second problem is President Erdogan is not a real popular fellow in the United States. In the media, he's not a popular fellow in the administration by 2015. In 2000, I can say when I was ambassador to Turkey, he was very popular with President Obama, but that relationship cooled. That's the subject of a whole other talk, and there's a lot of fault on both sides. But suffice to say, by that time, and it had not, the relationship had not gelled as we'd hoped it would. And so there was some confusion about, well, what are we hearing? Is this like Gezi Park? Is this something, the government says, and that produces these kind of stupid statements from the U.S. government. And as an American citizen, my apologies that my government would do things like this when the basic core truths, as I said, were evident within hours. Some of us made that point, not enough of us quick enough to get the government to act quickly. But eventually, it did get on board. Eventually, Joe Biden went out there. And this administration, you can see, is falling over itself to try to compensate. You notice within hours of the referendum, I think, was President Trump the first person to congratulate the Turkish president? I'm not sure, but it shows that this administration, if anything, will try to compensate for that, and that's a good thing. Now, so far, I sound pretty much like Ambassador Kilic or the Turkish government. Here's the problem from my perspective as an outside observer, and it's two issues. One issue is, I agree, the Turkish people were united against the Fethullah Gulen organization and the coup on the evening of July 15th. But the Turkish people are not unified. We saw that in the referendum, where there's almost a 50-50 split in that country. Now, we understand that. We have a very similar split in the United States. This isn't just a split on minor political issues. It's basic splits, and you have this in Britain with the Brexit vote. You have it in the United States with the 2016 election. You have it in Turkey, between which way my country is going. That's a reality. It's reflected in a whole series of polls, and that's something that we on the outside, the United States, all other countries, have to take into consideration, because that's a factor in what goes on in Turkey, in the stability of the country. When a country is consumed by the divisions internally, it's hard for it to act as quickly externally as you would like. The second problem is that, and ironically, the many criticisms of Turkey's problems as a democracy notwithstanding, the Turkish parliament came out with a very good review of what happened leading up to the coup. And I've just read a summary of it. And the parliament made clear that the government was not very active going after the Fethullah Gulenist movement for many years before 2015, despite the warnings. The ambassador correctly mentioned the Balios case in 2009, 2010. I was peripherally not involved in that, but I was following it closely. I knew some of the senior generals who were arrested and charged. And I was as sure as you can be in a situation like that, that these people were not disloyal to the Erdogan government. But the interesting thing is, no action was taken against the judiciary that was clearly going after these people for political reasons. That didn't occur until 2013. Then the judiciary and the police were purged, as far as I can see, of many, but not all, Gulenist movements, as we discovered again in 2015. But most importantly, and this was something I never heard when I was in Turkey, while there was a lot of rumors about Gulenists in, obviously, education, Gulenists in the business world, Gulenists in the judiciary, and particularly the police, I never heard anyone talk about Gulenists in the military. That's something that people just seem to rule out. That's something that we still have to figure out how that happened, and to avoid something like that, perhaps not with this movement, but with another movement occurring inside a country that's so important to us and so vital to not only its own very large and very important population, but to the region in which it resides. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Jeffrey. Again, another crisp analysis that gives you a slightly different side of the whole problem. I would like now to give the floor to my good friend and colleague, Professor Dr. Walid Phares, Vice President of BAU International University, and I might say former President of the Global Policy Institute. Right.
Thank you, my successor. Excellency, Ambassador, friends, I'm delighted to be here today to speak, to offer remarks actually about a very important earthquake-like event that shook off the foundation, not just of the Turkish government, but as we saw in that 3D video, amazing, and I would recommend that you would watch it as well, and I recommend that it should be offered to the public in America as well. As we saw, especially for people who came from the region and have seen in their lifetimes dramatic events, this is an event that basically touched the nerves, touched the soul of the Turkish people. That's why we are organizing this event, not just to talk about it from a technical perspective, but from a historical perspective. I, as my predecessor on this podium, good ambassador, will be short in remarks, but I hope that the discussion will cover most of the aspects. Let me first share with you, probably for the first time, a little bit of witness, because on this side we were busy during the elections. We had the presidential election with very heated time. July 15, I think, was around 1 week before the convention. And as you know, I have served during 2016 as one of the advisors of then candidate Donald Trump. And I was dealing with foreign affairs. And I remember vividly what has happened, at least partially, on our side. I mean, we were certainly, as advisors in foreign policy, looking at what's happening in the world and making suggestions and, you know, analyzing this for the candidates. And at the same time, somehow we were in communications with the administration, because the administration was supposed to be in the middle, and then you have two campaigns, and to get the assessment, especially if there were major events taking place. The tradition was that the campaigns, the candidates, will wait first for the sitting government, that's the administration, especially if they were terror attacks, or in this case, coup or terror attack, or massive change, or anything that would be considered as dramatic or tragic around the world. So here we go. As it was noted by the Turkish ambassador very clearly, it took long hours during that day before the White House or the State Department or the National Security Council makes a statement about it. Now I'll come back to this issue in a second. So we, the advisors of both campaigns, were waiting and see what would our government say so we could determine, because they had the information. The agencies would respond to the White House, not to the campaigns. So it took also many hours, but what I can testify about is our campaign at the time, because that's what I know more. There was back and forth between the various advisors and New York, the headquarters. I was in Washington, D.C. And then, I don't want to say suddenly, but in a sense it was sudden to the advisors. Here's the candidate who issues a statement which was rather advanced compared with the other campaign or with the administration, whereby he declared his solidarity with the Turkish government and people. You could see it, it's still online. And in a tweet, I guess, or no, actually it was in a statement, candidate Trump at the time said, "I saw the courage of the Turkish people." It impressed him. That video that you showed was shown more or less in 2Ds by CNN. And he said, I saw the Turkish people opposing the advance of the tanks. To him, and he loves reading about history, that was the peak, the epopee of the issue. So he congratulated the Turkish government and people and stood firm. Now, many in the media asked me after that, I mean, what were the basis for this position of then candidate Trump? And as it was mentioned by the esteemed ambassador, when the referendum was organized and took place, he was, yes, technically the first president, chief executive at least, to call and congratulate. Well, there were several points which we based our analysis in our reaction as a campaign at the time. One was the principle of rejecting military coup, any military coup, as you said, Paolo. Now, the good ambassador told us this was not just a coup, but at the time we have no information. I mean, at the time, during that day and the weeks that came after, it took time for Turkey to figure out and to let the world know what it really was. But to us, it was an attempt for a coup, and a very strange one. To share with you furthermore, the experts in Washington with whom we dealt, American, Turks, and others, found it very strange, because it was a traditional Turkish coup. You would see the whole army moving in and securing the situation. It wasn't. Actually, the army, the chief of staff, if I'm not wrong, made a statement against the coup in the very early part of it, saying these are, yes, he was taken hostage, but there was a statement made somewhere. Yes, said, well, that's not a coup. That was a shifting moment. It was a shifting moment. So number two, what impressed then the candidate and of course now President Trump is the fact that people rose. And we in the West in general, and liberal democracies, including in America, we sometimes judge issues on their legal aspect. It's a coup, so it's illegal, but also on the much larger political aspect. Who's with it and who's against it? And these were psychologically very important elements. There were no millions of Turkish citizens on the streets with the coup. That made a difference with many other cases. a third very important point was that the entire opposition was united against the coup. And I think that shifted the position of the United States, at least candidate. And now, of course, if God forbid this was to happen again, there or elsewhere, this is the actual measurement. What does the people want? Now, President Erdogan called on the people. I remember that very well. It was on TV, and he asked them to take to the streets, and they did. And that created the impact that is very important, at least psychologically and politically, from an American perspective. Now, the third point that is important and has been discussed and will be discussed is how was the event understood in the United States? Now, we had good remarks preceding me, but let me focus on two additional points. First of all, it was during US elections, US presidential elections. So it was, though in Turkey it was central, it was the heart of Turkey, in America it was one of the events. And as was mentioned by the panelists before me, the media did not give it what it deserves. The US media did not treat it as a massive issue. As, let's suppose there is a massive issue in Israel or in London, right? What happened on our networks here? It's 24/7. 24/7. If a terror attack occurs in Nice or in London or in any of those countries that are better known by most Americans, or if the mainstream media decides to focus on them, media can shift attention if it wants. It did not with regard to that specific event in Turkey. Second, and here let me go also to the Turkish side of it, there was probably a lot of information provided by Turkey, but little information was available here. If you ask average, I don't want to talk about citizens, but anchors or talking heads or people who comment on TV, these are the opinion makers who make the opinion. They didn't have much information. The leaders of the coup, for example, were not known here. What did they want to establish was not known here. So that is something, I think, in the case of the Turkish government, Turkish media, and of course those who obviously in Turkey are interested in developing a consciousness about it in America, to give more information. That would be very important. And last is the Gulen issue. Now here I have a couple points. Turkish government accused the Gulen movement and Fethullah Gulen as being behind it, organizing it, and giving the instructions. That is clear. That's files that we're talking about. But beyond that, before this happened, the Gulen movement in America for the 1 decade before that event has actually been criticized. Many pieces were posted, mainly from the late 1990s all the way to the 2000s, and it's online. Yet there was little reaction when these pieces and that information was released. And that's very important for the debate to understand what is the actual American position with regard to the Gulen movement. What was said in this opposition research or these pieces about Gulen is exactly what is now being said after the coup. It was said that this is an extremist organization, that it has an ideology compared to the radical movements that are now engaged in terrorism around the Middle East. This is not my finding. These were the findings of researchers who have basically tried to tell the American public that what you have here is a quasi-jihadi organization. So that is an important literature that exists. The problem then was that there was little reaction to it. There was little reaction before that movement does, according to what Turkish authorities have said on July 15 of last year. So it is important at this point in time to go back and see how the consciousness of the American public, because let me put it in a very short form. The Turkish government sent a request to the US government, the legal procedures to extradite Gulen and then go through trial in Turkey. We all know, this is not something secret, that our legal system, like most legal systems around the world, specifically in America, is a complex one. So once in court, the files are going to be open, and then they're going to call for witnesses and counter witnesses. We know that. But there is a system, and the system works, in my view. So what does not exist that could help in this case is that the American public, the base for Congress and the administration will be well informed. Well informed about the ideology of this movement, because we have a culture that is very sensitive to these extremist ideologies. I mean, the president went to Riyadh addressing 50 Muslim leaders and president and asking them to work against extremism. But that's policy. It has become policy. So all what should be done now is to focus on the ideology of this movement. Just open it up and let the public understand in America that it's not just a technical, legal matter. It's a matter of ideology that could be a threat not just to Turkey, but even to the United States. That would be a different ballgame if that is followed. And with this, I would like to again thank BAU, GPI, our honorable speakers, and all of you for coming. This is a very important event, and I hope that the discussion that will follow will also be rich. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Walid, for adding another dimension to this analysis. Indeed, it's important to know what the campaigns, even though obviously we had a sitting administration, which obviously is responsible for official responses, but what the administration did and what the campaign did, and the statements that were issued by then candidate Trump. Now, without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Dr. Denise Natali, and she will give us a different perspective on all this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, and I'd like to thank the Global Policy Institute, BAU University, and again, the Ambassador Kilic. Thank you for having me here today. When I listened to my distinguished panelists' discussion and also Madame Bayramoglu's discussion about the coup, it only reinforced what I want to just mention today briefly is the gross discrepancies between U.S. threat perceptions and Turkish threat perceptions, U.S. strategic priorities and Turkish strategic priorities, not only during the coup and how we responded, but how this is affecting, and what the real points I want to make is U.S.-Turkish relations moving forward. I was asked to talk about what were some of the U.S. views and what was going on in Washington. And by the way, these are my views, not those of the U.S. government or the Department of Defense or National Defense University. It's very clear that in Washington we had U.S. government official responses, and Ambassador Kilic did mention that it took hours before the U.S. responded. I do have a runout of just the official statement made by the White House at that time, which was the President and Secretary agreed that all parties in Turkey should support the democratically elected government of Turkey, show restraint, and avoid any violence or bloodshed. The Secretary underscored that the State Department will continue to focus on the safety and security of U.S. citizens in Turkey. Now, when you hear about this, we would think we had affirmed our interest with Turkey, we had affirmed our support for this democratically elected government, but still, this was not nearly close to what Turkish perceptions were. We didn't do enough, I heard this afternoon. We didn't extradite the Gulenists. There's absolutely very little understanding, in my view, in Washington of how deep this penetrates into the soul of Turkey. I don't think this conversation that we're having here, it would even make it to the press. So part of this, again, I see this as not just the coup, but we had growing tensions between Turkey and the United States before the coup. So what was the context in which the coup was set? Disappointment with the Obama administration. We also have, from the United States perspective, Syrian war going on, the anti-ISIS campaign going on, Turkey, in our view, not doing enough initially, Obama administration breaking red line promises. So we went into this coup trying to understand the different threat perceptions of already very different strategic priorities. But more importantly was what happened after the coup. And I think that that's what we should be focusing on now. Again, where our Turkish colleagues here and friends are talking about how this really has affected the soul of the Turkish state. And I get this. You know that what has dominated the media, particularly in Washington, particularly inside the Beltway, is personalities, individuals. I understand it's very emotional, but we're not talking about some of the strategic level issues that we should be talking about, but instead it's now talking about very personal issues. And there has been a lot of let's say, counterattacks back and forth. I don't want to get into the mucky details, but this type of conversation probably won't be put out because the think tank community, the academic community, the media is probably controlling this narrative right now. There are different branches of the U.S. government. I would say I agree with Ambassador Jeffrey that this new administration that I don't speak for is probably having a more balanced view, or at least a view of what our strategic priorities are. But, and I have to now talk about what's not the coup, is how do we think about our responses, why we're not extraditing the Gulenist, and that's a legal and technical issue, is we're in the midst still of this anti-ISIS campaign, and in my view, the U.S. response is really going to be set in counterterrorism, what's going on in terms of defeating ISIS, and how we can work with Turkey moving forward. Now, I think one of the issues is, what was asked of me, is also how can we look at our relationship moving forward, particularly after this gulf in our threat perceptions and strategic priorities. Is our relationship going to be values-based? And this is very, very sensitive here in D.C. Or is it going to be interest-based? And I really think that this value-based, scolding Turkey and pointing at Turkey for what's not right is not working. And I don't think it's productive. I think that right now, as long as our priorities are defeating ISIS, that we're operating still at a tactical level. And that has also undermined, I would say, very sensitive issues for Turkey. Arming the PYG, not understanding some of the deep threat perceptions of Turkey, that this is an existential threat to the Turkish state. We can go on these differences, but until that part of the puzzle's over, we're not still focusing on some of these strategic level priorities that we should be, and I envision some of these tensions continue. However, how do we move forward? As I said, interest-based, not value-based. That doesn't mean that we throw the ideas of democracy out the window, but there was a I think it was Ambassador Kilic used a great word called selective morality. And I couldn't agree more. If we're going to start scolding Turkey and pointing our finger at Turkey and getting involved in internal issues, then we're going to either have to do this across the region or we lose credibility. And I would more so focus on what's going to happen after the day after ISIS. What are the United States' national security interests in the region? Containing terrorism, preventing it from hitting the homeland, assuring the flow of refugees does not affect our allies and destabilizing the region, and 3, assuring the free flow of energy resources to world markets. And in that sense, I cannot see how we can do any of this without Turkey. I mean, personalities may have changed or not, but geography hasn't. And this is a country with a 900-kilometer border, as you know, with Syria, several hundred kilometers border with Iraq and Iran. I can't see for a minute how we can engage in stabilizing the region without Turkey and without looking at some of these strategic level issues. Unfortunately, these types of issues are not on the table right now. We're operating still at an operational level. However, I wouldn't expect, and I'm sorry to say, that some of these issues that we're talking about are just not going to take hold in the media. The good news is I think there are folks, whether that's in the administration or in the State Department or in DOD, that get it. So there's the noise, and it's a lot of noise that, as Ambassador Jeffrey said, it's really hard to find a positive comment about President Erdogan in the press. And we don't need to talk about personalities, but within the internal operations of government, in my view, there are folks who know at a strategic level, I don't see how we can move forward without Turkey. And so that's where we should be looking at. However, there still has to be attempts to push this gap between what our threat perceptions are and what we understand what Turkey's threat perceptions are. And we just don't understand much of what was said today in this room. I don't think we'll ever even hit the think tank community here in Washington, D.C. Thank you.
Thank you so much again for this other perspective and analysis. Well, let me be a little optimistic. I hope that the excellent remarks and analysis that have been articulated today will go beyond this room. I hope so. At least that we will have an opportunity to contribute to what is a vital conversation, which is not just about Turkey and U.S.-Turkish relations, but about the values and democracy and the NATO alliance and way beyond that. And with that, let me yield the floor to my good friend and colleague Burak Kuntay, who will kind of put it all together for us. Thank you, Burak.
Distinguished guests, once again, welcome to Global Policy Institute and BAU International University's joint event. It's always a great pleasure to host all these distinguished friends here. I have a lot of titles. I'm the senior fellow in Global Policy Institute, which I'm not going to be speak with that title today. I'm the president of American Studies Center, or the dean of the graduate school of Bahcesehir University, Turkey, which I'm not going to use that title. I am a professor of international relations. I'm not going to use it today. I'm a journalist in Hürriyet newspaper. I'm a columnist. I'm not going to use that today. I'm going to use my title as a son of Burak Kuntay, who was taken down by a coup in 1980, and as a grandson of Ismail Kuntay, who was taken down with a coup in 1960, and a Turkish man, Burak Kuntay. Today my title is just that. Let me tell you how I grew up. I'm the only child of my family. By the way, I studied in the United States. I know everything about America. I know every feeling that how American people feels. I got my entire education in Florida. By the way, this gentleman was my professor for years. I owe him a lot. I'm a man who understands this country and how it behaves, how it reacts, how it thinks. And also I'm a Turkish man, and I'm a good combination of these two mentalities. My father always taught me about the 1960 coup d'etat. A prime minister of Turkey, Adnan Menderes, who was elected by the people, for the people, by the people, was hanged brutally after a coup. My grandfather was at jail in Yassada with him for a long time. And one of the most important things that I have from my family is the letters that my grandfather wrote to my father from Yassada. I still read them, I still look at them, and that's the value of my family. That's more important than everything to me. Then for 20 years, my father get into politics, 60 to 80. He was a deputy, representing Turkish Meclis. Then that time we had two cameras. He was a senator also. He was the minister. He was the vice president of Justice Party, Adalet Partisi. And in 1980, boom. Some people said, you get elected by the people, but it doesn't matter, because we have guns. And taken down. I pretty much remember my childhood as some people were calling me as the son of a banned guy. Banned. Because they were banned from politics. They were not allowed to do politics. And they were showing me his father is banned. I was young, I didn't understand what a banned man's son is. But then I realized it's such a stupid thing in a democracy. In 1947, if I'm not mistaken, if I do, excuse me, I'm your student. I should have learned all these things well. Churchill, I think it was November 1947, in the opening remarks of House of Commons, if I'm not mistaken. He said that democracy is a bad way of governing a government, but all the rest is worse. Churchill, 1947. You might like President Erdogan, you might not. You might like his policies, you might not. You might enjoy working with him, you might not. But there's one truth, that the democracy shows one simple fact. People goes to ballots and they vote. And whoever gets out of the ballot, he's the winner. He's the governor. He's the governing person. He's the governing entity. He or she is the people or the person who is going to rule for the term. And then when that term is over, you go to the ballot again. You ask it to the people. You know, after this coup d'etat, the reactions, especially from here, you know how I feel? Let's imagine a guy who has a cholesterol problem, also high blood pressure, also serious infections, but he's shot, deadly shot, he's wounded. You take him to the emergency, and the first thing the doctor says is, you have a bad blood pressure. You should have been careful about the salt. But he's bleeding to death. The other doctor comes and says that you are diabetic. You shouldn't have eaten a lot of sugar before. The guy is dying. He got shot. Coup attempt in Turkey was something like that. After 1980, I always thought it's not going to happen. I was on the top of the bridge that night. By the way, I was not one of the people who went to the bridge. I was caught at the bridge. I was going home. And for a couple of days, I still had problem to believe that was actually a coup d'etat attempt. Because in 2016, sorry, a mentality, a treason, something like that could have never happened in my mentality. I always heard it from my father, from my family, but it could have never been happened. But some people try to do this to give harm to my country. In any way, successful, unsuccessful, because I believe no coup's ever been successful in the world. You might think you overthrow the government, but in a long term, it has always been unsuccessful. So the guy is shot. Turkey is trying to defend its own democracy, own self. And you know what? The questions and the answers, you get it. But President Erdogan is not that democratic. We had a coup. We had a coup attempt. Mr. Ambassador Jeffrey, he is a remarkable ambassador. He was great. He knows Turkey better than a lot of professors who has been dealing with Turkey. He said that Turkey is split. It's a good thing. And the problem is if we have 90% of the people voted yes or no, then that have a problem. 50-50 is good. 25-25, 25-25 is also good. That's a democracy. But our main thing in the United States, we shouldn't have explained about the coup attempt in this country at all. Look, Tayyip kardeşim, Allah razı olsun. Bir kalkar mısın? You know this gentleman? He's gonna be speaking in a couple minutes. He got shot. Köprüdeydin değil mi? İlk gidenlerden. Ne oldu? He got shot at the top of the bridge, and from his back, he got shot, and it was so critical. He's gonna tell you. Ayakta tutmayayım seni çok fazla, yeni recover etti. This is the reality. This is what happened on that night. And then, when we try to explain the situation to the world, listen, the guy is doing this. We got the answer of, but how about the, the freedom of this, freedom of that? That was a coup attempt. Come on. Are you joking? That's a coup attempt in a democratic country who is a very close ally to the United States. And any kind of coup attempt in a country like Turkey is not only shaking one country, it's shaking the entire region. It's risky, not for Turkey alone, but in the entire perspective of the Western world. And you know what is the worst part? I don't know, like, if anything is better in this kind of coups, but at least sometimes I'm thinking the coups happened before. It was a stupid, unlogical, but you know who was doing it? Yani a military guy. But as Mr. Ambassador just mentioned this, some people who had guns in their hand and supposedly unearned, I believe, ranks on their shoulders, were following guys called imams of askeriye, imam of media, imam of this. That's a weird grassroots organized by these people, and they corrupt the entire system for a long time. You might criticize who, was one of the reasons happened on this. We can talk about it for that. But we can talk about the diabetics, we can talk about the cholesterol, we can talk about the sodium, we can talk about everything later on. But there's a coup attempt. That guy was shot, and people like him, over 2,000 people were shot, and over 200 died. That's nothing to talk about. We have a very important thing in our hands. A survey shows that almost 90% of the country believes that. Okay? Believes that that coup is organized by Fethullah Gülen organization. Simple and easy. Şimdi, as I said, I'm a professor of American history, American politics. I know it is not an easy thing to extract Gülen from this country. I know that. But you know what's the problem? That's a legal process that cannot happen from night to day. I understand. Not everybody might. I do, because I'm working with this. But you know where that guy is? If you put in your GPS here, Pennsylvania, Washington DC, how long it takes? Hocam? 2 hours maybe? No. If there's no traffic, it's around 2 hours from the capital of the United States of America, the defender of the democracies, the defender and the most important protector of the democracies. In the heart of that country, 2 hours from here, in an non-traffic time. The guy is over there who attempted the coup. That hurts Turkey. That hurts me. That hurts a man who understands this country, who feels himself a part of this great political free environment. But it hurts me. You know what hurts me? My grandma, he's 98 by the way. She was born as an Ottoman citizen. So your father, right? She loves America. You know why? When you tell her, Grandma, yeah, what's the deal with you and US? You love these guys a lot. Yeah, I can criticize United States in a lot of ways, but my grandmother loves it a lot. I'm like, why? She said, because they saved us from the Moscows. Most of you won't understand the term Moscows, because at that time in Turkey, right before the Truman Doctrine, you know, there was a serious attempts from the Russia, Soviets actually, about the Bulgaria-Turkish border, the Kars-Ardahan region, and that kind of areas. But suddenly when USS Missouri arrived into Bosphorus, when the people of Turkey welcomed the United States, and it showed the President Trump and in US Congress with a speech, showed that United States is with Turkey, the democracy. That started a lot of things. That started the great friendship between these two countries. That's why that woman at the age of 98, she lives alone. She's brilliant. As we call in Turkish, eski toprak. She loves this country. Why? Because she doesn't read on the newspaper what President Obama or President Trump said about the coup d'etat events or the PKK issue. She saw the action. And the action was US came and helped Turkey to save its own borders. That's the action. These are the talks. Şimdi, let me tell you. I love this country a lot. My friends are living here. I feel myself part of here. That's my second place. I mean, I studied here. I lived here. But you know what? A guy is killing my friends, my brothers in Turkey, and he's just 2 hours away from here, and he's free. He can go to, Kmart. He can go to CVS, he can go anywhere the way he wants. Am I right? He's free. Okay, don't extract him, there's a process, but at least you know what he did. You know what's the other problem? The guy, PKK, PYD, YPG, killing my people. And then the weapons and the training facilities are sent from Turkey, actually from here, to PKK, PYD, and YPG. Everything has a reason, I understand. I'm an international relations expert. But there's one thing that we have to be honest. The words, the comments, the diplomacy, the business points, all good, no problem. But the facts are the facts. The reality is the reality. What you do for me is what you do for me. What you say about what you're gonna do for me is not what you are doing for me. So, long word short. Turkey has a close friend. You might not like the way Turkey handling its own situations. You don't have to. We might not like United States are handling their internal issues. We might not have to. But we are good friends. We are bounded to each other. We shared a lot of common things. We shared a lot of common values. And both these countries are playing a very critical role for the world. Do not underestimate this friendship. But when I'm coming in the most needed time in my life to my best friend and ask for support, confidence about two specific things are killing my people, are hurting me, are destroying my values, and when you just get, we are behind you from the mouth, but not from the foot. not from the actions. That's critical. So you know what happened between 15th of July to 15th of July last 1 year?
He's not here.
Big problems in a lot of ways. But maybe more than everything, the confidence, the beliefs, the values of the friendships are shaken. I believe the future of Turkish-American relations. I believe the past of Turkish-American relations. I believe the values of this country. I believe the values of Turkey. That's the important test. But the last thing I'm gonna say is this. At least we discovered, it was bloody, it was hurtful, but we discovered the problem late. Later is better than never. But the guy is here. His system is here. His entire establishment is here. One day, and trust me, it's not gonna be long, if this mentality, what he did in Turkey, is gonna continue here, it's gonna be your big problem here. So, help you God. Thank you.
Thank you, Burak, and thank you for wearing your two hats of being both a Turkish citizen and a friend of the United States, and given your long history here, having studied here and knowing America very well. With that, ladies and gentlemen, after having listened to so many interesting and eloquent accounts and analysis about these tragic events of last year, we would like to open it for questions and answers. Questions from the floor? Yes, let's start with this gentleman.
My name is David North.
Maybe we need a...
Center for Immigration Studies, and we can bring in my... Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm David North. I'm with the Center for Immigration Studies, which is a think tank in Washington, D.C., about half a mile from here. My interest is not the Middle East particularly. My interest is in immigration. And what I find sort of surprising is that there has been a total lack of unity and coordination on the part of the anti-Galan efforts in this country, which don't relate to Turkey at all. They relate to stealing money from schools, stealing money from teachers. Some of that has been on 60 Minutes, but very little of it has been picked up by most of the rest of the media. And there seems to be no organization that's bringing together some stories about the way that the charter schools are the Galan charter schools are undoing American way of education. And I'm just puzzled by that, and I wanted to share that with this group. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Anybody? Thank you so much for this observation. Yes, Mr. Ambassador.
Thank you. Because of the shortage of time, I couldn't be able to dwell on the activities of Fethullah Gülen in the United States. I totally agree with Mr. Kuntay that it's going to be problematic for the United States if necessary measures in that regard are not taken in a timely fashion. He's running 170 charter schools in the United States now. And he's collecting around $700 million from US taxpayers' pockets. And we don't know where that money is spent, how that money is spent. That money is supposed to be spent for educational activities on those schools. But we have evidence that that money is sent to Pennsylvania, to the headquarters, to finance the activities of Fethullah Gülen terrorist organization and PR activities of Fethullah Gülen. And there are H-1B visa irregularities. They are bringing teachers from Turkey to the charter schools in the United States, run by Fethullah Gülen, the terrorist organization, as if there are not enough and qualified US teachers in the US system. So I mean, that needs to be investigated as well. I mean, there's a gentleman claiming to be an Islamic clergy and running 170 schools, charter schools in the United States. He is engaged in administering schools in Turkey, and this is how he recruited his followers at the first place and brainwashed the children at their very early ages. Same thing is happening in the United States. We did not notice it until it was too late. The education and brainwashing that does not take place in the schools. And parallel to those schools, they establish the lighthouses as they define them. And the after hours The children were taken there and brainwashed. This is going to be problematic for the United States in the future. And I don't understand why IRS is not involved in this issue. There is money laundering over there. I can share you enormous information as far as transfer of huge amounts of donations from Turkey to those schools in the United States. If the school is financed by the US authorities, by the states, why on earth they will need donations from Turkey in excess of $1 million per school? That needs to be investigated by IRS and other financial institutions of the United States. Their involvement in the illegal financing of US congressmen and senators' campaigns as well. That has not been investigated properly so far. All those need to be investigated. And not for the sake of Turkey, for the sake of the future of the US democracy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Thank you for that. Yes, this gentleman over here, please.
Hello, my name is Safan Alverdi, correspondent for Anadolu Agency. My question is for Mr. Jeffrey. First of all, I understand and could agree on some part of what you've been saying, and thank you for explaining us the part we have hard time to understand as a Turkish citizens. But when we go back to the day when 9/11 terrorist attack happened, President Bush had found right to say, this is about our freedom and security, and you are either with us or against us. As we saw from the actions that U.S. took after 9/11, such as going into Iraq or Afghanistan, President Bush wasn't joking. My question is to you as a former ambassador to Turkey and a U.S. Senior U.S. Diplomat. When we compare the U.S. and Turkey's reaction on the threats they face with, what makes it reasonable for the U.S. to do whatever its behalf, but not for Turkey, which had a worst experience in its history?
That's a really great question, and I've never heard it put quite that way, because my answer would be, as somebody who was very much involved in actions right at that time and later, most Americans would think that partially or totally much of what we did, including going into both, certainly Afghanistan, we've been in there now for 17 years, well, 16 years, and Iraq was largely a mistake. Just because you have a reason to respond, just because you have been gravely wounded, does not necessarily mean that everything you do makes sense. In fact, sometimes it requires somebody from the outside to look. Not so much Afghanistan, but we had allies, including Turkey, Germany, and France, who said, you really shouldn't be doing this. This is the wrong response to 9/11. We didn't listen to them. And probably most Americans think that was a mistake. So, you have to separate the need to act and the justice of acting from the specifics of what you do. Regardless of what's happened to you, how you respond is subject to the same laws of nature, the same laws of cause and effect, the same laws of what works and what doesn't as any other action. And that applies to Turkey, that applies to the United States.
Very quick, please, because there are others. The microphone. Yes.
U.S. administration would do the same thing if same kind of terrorist attack, hits the United States. Would they take the same actions or similar actions?
What is the same thing? Certainly, if there was a major internal movement that tried to overthrow the democratic order in the United States, the reaction of the American authorities would be extremely severe. But again, certainly not with the Trump administration, but even in its official statements with the Obama administration, there was relatively little criticism of Turkey. It's going to be the normal, be careful, pay attention to the rule of law, pay attention to the independence of the judiciary, the freedom of the media and such. But basically, this was not a major issue. I've heard a lot of discussions of American-Turkish relations since last summer, and they've covered the YPG, they've covered Fethullah Gulen, they've covered Iran, they've covered Iraq. But I haven't sensed a major concern in the administration, officially, the last administration, certainly not this one, to the human rights concerns that many people in the media and many people in Congress have towards Turkey. But that's part of the way American opinion is formed in the United States. You have to separate the government's position, which is a legitimate question, I tried to give an answer, from how Americans who are interested in the world perceive the world, be it Turkey, be it Egypt, be it Poland.
Thank you. Next question. Did I see any other? Yes. This gentleman, thank you.
Thank you. My name is Cemre Efe from Turkish Coalition of America. My question is for Ambassador Serdar Kilic. I would like to know if the embassy is watching Fethullah Gulen. What would happen if he escapes the United States? Can he escape the United States? Thank you.
Well, we are not watching him. We don't have any any authority in that regard. We are a U.S. government-hosted entity in the United States. I mean, it will not be proper to do so. But I hope that the United States authorities will take necessary measures as far as his extradition to Turkey. I mean, whether he's going to South Africa or Canada, that's a secondary issue for me. He committed a crime. I mean, there was a mention to Hollywood by one of the panelists. When I talk to certain U.S. media outlets and members of the public opinion, they listen to me as if I'm highlighting a Hollywood movie when I refer to the events on the 15th of July. Well, they should understand that it was not a Hollywood movie. It was scripted in Pennsylvania. It was organized in Pennsylvania, and it was conducted by the loyalists of Pennsylvania in Turkey. That should be understood. There's an agreement of 1979 for the extradition of those kind of criminals between the two countries, and there are certain articles in that regard. We expect the US authorities to honor the provisions of that agreement and extradite him to Turkey to appear before the Court of Justice. And until such moment, as Mr. Kuntay has mentioned, he is living 200 kilometers roughly from Washington, D.C. He has a total freedom of movement. He can appear on the TV. He can still give instructions to his followers in Turkey, those that are in jail, or those that are still trying to hide themselves in the government institutions that they have infiltrated, or in the society for that matter. So that should be stopped. There is a gentleman residing in Pennsylvania who was part and parcel of the 15th of July events, the terrorist attack on the Turkish democracy, and he should be questionable in that regard. The US authorities should take necessary measures that are commensurate with the relations of alliance between Turkey and the United States. Ms. Natali mentioned value or interest-based in terms of defining our relations. They are not mutually exclusive. They can be treated in tandem. Values, we attach the utmost importance to freedom of expression, but we cannot agree with the expression of solidarity with terrorism. This is the main distinction between the two. Freedom of expression and expression of solidarity with terrorism. There is a fine line in between the two. That should be realized by the US authorities. Independence of judiciary is of utmost importance. We have cleared 4,500 members of Fethullah Gulen terrorist organizations from the Turkish judiciary. We brought back the neutrality and independence of the Turkish judiciary after the actions that we have taken. That should be seen by the US authorities. That should be understood by the US authorities. So we have expectations in that regard. Expectations that will be commensurate between the relations of alliance between the Turkey and the United States. Thank you.
Many thanks, Mr. Ambassador. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
My name is Nurşin Ateşoğlu Güney from Professor Istanbul, Turkey. Denise Natali has mentioned about that the two countries, the discrepancy between the two countries in terms of threat perception is quite widened. And this is a reality. But I'm also wondering, talking about the policies, the authorities in two sides of, in US and in Turkey, but we're not mentioning anything about the feelings of Turkish people living in Turkey. There is a trauma right after the July 15th failed coup. I was also outside that night because there was a wedding, so I was caught up in the bridge as well. So I also very much eyewitness what was happened. And it was the courageous of Turkish people walking on the bridges very bravely without thinking that they might lose their lives. They stood against these plotters. But these two things, these two problematic issues that we are witnessing, both the attitude of Gülenist movement, its existence in the U.S. and the government's positions, both previous and this ones, this issue, as well as the given assistance of YPG is also the most important issues that are thought to be cases for survival, because Turkey is under threat of multi-faceted terrorist attacks and is trying to defend its survival against this. So it is not a matter of discrepancy between the threat of perceptions. You cannot divide it, because once we're talking about global terrorism, there is no good terrorist or a bad terrorist. We know that yesterday Mosul has been somehow sold from the Daesh, but if you don't go to the root causes, if you just wipe off the flames of what has caused these events, tomorrow you'll have anything different name, like U.S. has experienced it very well in Afghanistan. I'm meaning the Taliban. So these things at the level of people are not helping. We're losing Turkish people. Anti-Westernism, anti-Americanism is really having an impact. It's increasing. So in addition to this, we have the trust problem. That is the most important thing that the two governments at the governmental level needs to pay attention to it. As an allies for more than 45 years, the trust has been lost between the two sides, which is very important. I mean, I'm really wondering, you very rightfully mentioned the strategic, upper level causes that might, bring the two sides together. I understand what you mean. The energy issue, the geopolitics, the geoeconomics. Yes, these are high-level issues that might bring not only Ankara and Washington, it could also bring, as we have seen, Russia and United States on issue-based ad hoc alliances. But how are we going to, as Burak has mentioned, recover the lost trust? How are we going to focus on this trust-building issue? How are we going to trust to each other? I mean, we're talking about strategic partnership, we're talking about being allies in NATO, and we have seen the fleeing FETÖ military men to NATO countries. This is serious, I really wonder what would be your recipe for this, because it is a matter of confidence building that we also need to be focused on it, and this also has to have resonance to the people on the ground, the Turkish people. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes,
thank you for your comments. I think we agree. I mean, when I said the gap in threat perceptions, I mean that I don't think we really understand from our end how deep and visceral this is to the existential, is an existential threat to Turkey. That we can sometimes make there are some statements made in the media. The YPG is not, we don't think it's the PKK. I mean, we shouldn't even make statements like this because it's ridiculous, because most of us know it is. So these kinds, I mean, what can we do to build confidence? One, again, it's being clearer and making those types of statements at different levels. Even the narrative, Turkey is a strategic partner and an indispensable ally to the United States. The United States, under no way, shape, or form, can support PKK entities in these areas. I mean, not just saying it, but then on the other hand, after we see this anti-ISIS campaign completed, and I think what happens in Raqqa, the way Raqqa falls, and after is also going to be very important, right? I mean, you're right, there's a lot of distrust. We said that they would leave here, they didn't. You asked not to arm them, we did. I mean, and there's a lot of big debate in Washington. Right, so one way is, no, Raqqa will be run by those communities that effectively live in Raqqa. We did this in northern Iraq and it worked out quite well, right? We drew lines about where groups could go. So I would say, you know, and I do believe that there are people aware of this as well, that you can't move forward. And finally, I do think also, again, after these campaign tactical levels are over, there is going to be this focus on reconstruction, securing borders. Again, the emphasis on state sovereignty, territorial integrity of borders. I don't think that that resonates as well here, that when I go to the region regularly, most folks will say to me, why does the United States want to break up these states? Like Arabs, everybody. And from our end, this is mesmerizing because people said, we don't. We believe in the territorial integrity of these states. So I think there's, again, a lot of these gaps, even in the narratives, even in the statements that some officials make can be fine-tuned, and more high-level, obviously, discourses, meetings, conversations between our officials. I'm a little bit more positive. I believe it. I mean, I don't usually a positive or negative person, just a realist. But again, some of these tactical level issues, once that campaign is over, will remain just that, and if we can move forward. Yeah, I know.
Turkish people want reassurance, real guarantees. I mean, after all, experienced 6 years of hazardous externalities, negative externalities to Turkey, the Syrian civil war, and fractured strategies of Iraq is very much so hurt Turkey.
Yeah.
I mean, in hard power security issues and soft power security issues.
And to be fair, too, and Ambassador Jeffrey said it, there's a big, you know, we shouldn't take, although it's the most vocal, the news, the media, the think tanks, this is the noise. But that is not what most of, you know, you'll hear the same statements officially made by different legs of the U.S. government, which is, this is an internal issue, this is you know, a democratically elected government, and we're not, but still it dominates the narratives, which does affect Turkish people, I imagine, right?
Yes, thank you.
Sure.
Yes, sir. Please wait for a second. Yeah, the microphone. Yes.
All right. My name is Mustafa Tansır. I'm the president of the Musiyat USA, and my question to Mr. Ambassador Jeffrey. There was a successful coup in Egypt about a year or year and a half ago before the coup attempt in Turkey. And almost everybody was agree it was clearly coup in Egypt, but based on my knowledge, if I'm not wrong, but US has not been officially announced it was a coup. And because approaching was a politically, not based on the law or based on the legal procedure. But when you look at the request of Turkey, extradite of the Gulen, the US administration is not approaching with the same way. And on that subject, US administration is using a legal procedure. What is the main criteria to clarify subject as a political or legal procedure based on the, did I make myself clear? All right, thank you.
Yeah, the Egyptian coup is a good example because if I were to cite another example of how this last administration spends days and weeks trying to figure out what its position will be on something, the coup in Egypt, and Egypt is also a very important country to us, was a good example. Were we for it? Were we against it? Was this an assault on democracy because President Moisi had been democratically elected, or was it not? Now, the specific issue that you're talking about is if you call it a coup, you have to cut off all military aid. The military aid to Egypt is about $1.4 billion a year. It is extraordinarily important, including in fighting ISIS, which is currently quite active in the Sinai. There's no way that the United States could cut that off, so the United States found a way not to call it a coup. The United States did cut off some military equipment, but that was not done on the basis of the law, but rather on the basis of Washington trying to send a signal to the Sisi government thereafter. In terms of Gulen, this is a judicial decision by an independent magistrate. I don't know the internal workings of the U.S. government in detail, but I've talked to people who are closer to it, and the ambassador's concerns are correct, and the question is, why don't you do more to clip Fethullah Gulen's wings by everything from tax investigations to travel bans to various other things. And there is some, but not, it's limited latitude the U.S. government could do. But every step the U.S. government does in that direction will weaken its case before a court. This is a guy who's got lawyers who has taken on the U.S. government twice in the past 20 years, and he's won both times. He has a very effective legal system, and the Department of Justice, to the extent it will decide to prosecute this case, would rather win it than lose it. And so I think there is a reluctance by the people in justice to take any steps at this point, independent of the extradition process, which is basically like a court case that moves forward as they gather evidence from Turkey and put together their own case, because they have to argue, the Department of Justice argues the case before the magistrate, not the government of Turkey or anybody else, and Gulen can basically defend himself there. So it is not the same as a court case, but it moves very close to it in terms of the way these things play out.
Based on my understanding, U.S. administration sometimes might override on legal decisions based on the profits. Like Egypt, there was a coup based on my understanding, but it's not been announced because of if they announce they need to cut the military.
Right. But this doesn't involve a court. It doesn't involve the U.S. cannot override the court. The procedure is set out in the agreement between the U.S. and Turkey. That procedure involves using the American judicial system, a magistrate, and that's the end of the issue.
Thank you.
Just to clarify this, if I may, Mr. Ambassador, clarify, this is a separate procedure altogether. We have an independent judiciary that will have to examine the extradition request on its merit. At least that's the U.S. procedure. So it's not that the government decides which is which.
The government has various steps. In fact, at the end, it's
yes.
the Secretary of State who has to sign for the extradition afterwards. But there is a court component of this. That is what the Department of Justice looks at.
Yeah. And yes, sir. The microphone, please.
Thank you. I'm Rafi Danziger, a consultant to APAC, and my question is addressed to Ambassador Kilic. As we heard before, there's no such thing as good terrorists, bad terrorists, all terrorists are bad. Now, Hamas is clearly a terrorist organization that has gone after civilians, suicide bombings, buses, restaurants, etc., and fired rockets into civilian population centers. Is there a chance that Turkey will eventually define Hamas as a terrorist organization and kick out its activists from Turkey? Thank you.
Well, Hamas leaders being in Turkey, it's a myth. They are not in Turkey. And on the other hand, Hamas is a reality in Gaza. They were elected by the people of Gaza, and we are not supporting the terrorist activities of Hamas, but its humanitarian activities in order to meet the requirements of the innocent people in Gaza. I will not go into that, into the politics of that issue, because the subject of this meeting is totally different than the issue that you have mentioned. We are not supporting terrorism. Terrorists are terrorists, and we do not make any distinction in between the terrorist organizations. If you make that analogy, then I could have asked you why the United States is providing short-term and tactical support to YPG-PYD in Syria. Can you explain to the Israeli ambassador in Washington, D.C., any short-term or tactical support of Hezbollah in Lebanon in fight with another terrorist organization? Can you justify that? Can you explain that to the Israeli ambassador in Washington, D.C.? You cannot. But you are trying to explain that to me in Washington, D.C. as the Turkish ambassador. Hezbollah is an existential threat for Israel. So is YPG and PYD to Turkey. So, I mean, as far as the Hamas is concerned, yes, we are supporting the innocent civilians in Palestine, in Gaza. They need water, they need energy, and they need food. And we are supporting that to the Palestinian people in that region. And Hamas is the elected government body in Gaza. It's a reality. And we are just supporting humanitarian activities of the elected people in Gaza. That's it. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And with that, I would like to thank all of you, ladies and gentlemen, and thank our distinguished panelists. Please join me. This has been an excellent discussion. So we've made a slight change of plans. So before we listen to our eyewitnesses, their accounts, there's a video that has been brought to us, and maybe we can start with that. Do we have it? Thank you, Mr. Ambassador, for coming back to us. Thank you. So maybe we stick. All right, then back to the original program. Now the ambassador is with us, we can officially start again, and I would like to give the floor to our first eyewitness. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, distinguished participants and member of press. First of all, I would like to welcome you all. At the outset, I would like to give my special thanks to Mr. Ambassador Serdar Kilic for his presence today, and for your presence and for your patience, because I know it's like 2 hours you are sitting here, and long lectures and the other things. I would like to thank you all, and if you let me, I'm going to start with my presentation. The history of politics is filled with countless examples of governance systems such as oligarchs, monarchs, kingdoms, democracy, and more. Mankind has learned how to substitute mutual understanding, tolerance, a better and livable society together at the price paid. The history is all about who gains the power, who is controlling the power. There has been always deadly struggles between those who want to live their own preferences and who want to impose their own preferences. While those who want to live their preferences choose open and transparent democratic methods, the others prefer to use dark instruments. However, strength does not come from the physical capacity, but from the indomitable will, as Mahatma Gandhi says. For sure, Turkish history cannot be read from the rest of the world. Turkish military coup d'etats and memoranda in Turkey dates back to Ottoman Empire era. Unfortunately, this tradition didn't change during Republican era. On the contrary, the role of the army to intervene in the politics was strength. The only thing that changed was the ideological legitimization of the intervening role. Once they used the breach of Sharia now as a justification, now they use the breach of secularism. The rejection of the military memorandum issued in 2007 was the first ever reaction of a Turkish government against the notion of a coup d'etat since 1960. While rejecting the issued memorandum, the ruling AK Party was underpinned by a social consensus of the society, both AKP voters and non-voters. Following this civilian politics was strength, and some steps were taken through democracy, but of course, this wasn't the full transformation or reformation for the army. After 1960s, Turkey has experienced 9 different coup attempts in different forms. Almost 10 years after the 2007 military memorandum, Turkey has faced a new military coup once again. Almost no one thought of the possibility of a coup in the first instance. That night I was in Ankara, I was in Çankaya, in the residence place of the Prime Minister. I was walking down the street, and when I saw the jets flying low altitude, and I first thought that we are entering the war to Syria or something, but I never thought about the possibility of a coup, because it was 2017 and Turkey has a stable ground, and there was the same, ruling party in the power for about 15 years, and economic growth, everything was established. The picture was like that, but so nobody thought about this. I made several phone calls, and after all, we understood it's a coup. Yeah, it was a coup. People, after several minutes, and people started to take streets before the call of Prime Minister and before the call of Erdogan, the President Erdogan. Of course, there was no mention that no excuse for a coup, but when you look at the Turkish image, you find it really weird, because hearing the news, people was shocked, and the first impression, the first reaction was, after we visit the MRPs and veterans houses, they all told us, even the people with no education, the first reaction, because Turkey has a Syria experience in front, so they all thought that we may not be like Syria or Egypt, because we have the experience of Syria, and we live with them. We have the migrants. We are the first country coming in the world who helps them. So time passed by, and at midnight, the anchor of TRT was forced to read the statement of the coup plotters, that the Peace at Home Council declared that the army has seized the power, the control of the country, and proclaimed the martial law. Later on, President Erdogan made a call to people to resist against the coup plotters. His resistance, his decisiveness, and his courageous stance played a vital role in the failure of a coup attempt. It was a non-violent, armless resistance against traitors, because people didn't know that the traitors, the army, the soldiers, the policemen, you pay the money, you pay the taxes, and you pay the salaries, and they point out the guns to you. So nobody was waited. It was a shock. It was a surprise. Nobody was waited something like this. Some have stonewalled the garrisons. Some walked miles to the airport to prevent the airport and to make a wall for the President Erdogan. Some have parked their own cars in front of the tanks, and people who know and live in Turkey knows that cars are very important to men in Turkey. It's expensive, and they are like their children. But they parked their cars in front of tanks. They hit the tanks by sticks. They went over the soldiers by their bare hands. And that night, the top-rated Google search was how to stop a tank. Yes, it's weird, but it's like that. At the sunrise, the coup attempt was failed and over, but the cost was heavy. 240 martyrs and about 2,700 veterans. The coup was well planned, and the community as a power never considered before come into play and change the equilibrium. In the light of evidences today and that day, 1 year before, we are absolutely sure that behind the coup there is FETÖ organization. Most of you you already know. Later developments have clearly displayed it, and we are talking about in the light of the evidences, in the light of the proofs. FETÖ was infiltrated into the entire public institutions, notably the military, judiciary, security, communication, for almost 40 years. Turkish public opinion knew this after MIT crisis, which is national security, national intelligence agency, and after 17-25 December operations to Prime Minister and to some ministers, they know about the FETÖ organization, the Turkish public opinion, and for example, here I wanna give an example from my own experience. When I was a child, a friend of mine, her family belongs to this FETÖ community, and her mom told him, he was my schoolmate, classmate, and one day you're gonna marry with the daughter of the prime minister, but she will never know that you belong to this community. One day you're gonna marry the most important man in Turkey or somewhere in the world, and she or he never will know about your real identity. It's really sneaky because the one, your closest person to you, your spouse is the closest one to you, and you never tell him or her your real identity. It's unsincere, sneaky, and I can't imagine something like this. But the agenda is different. That's why they believe in this, and they they trace their own agenda. Nevertheless, July 15th is a milestone for the entire political parties, and they made a joint declaration together that they rejected the coup attempt and condemned, cursed the FETÖ organization. The argument of the Turkish society is polarized was falsified that night. I mean, in the first session, somebody, I don't remember the name right now, but there's a polarization in Turkish society. Yes, we used to believe in this before this coup attempt, but that night we are all falsified by the general consensus of the every class of the society were together, and we are all see that the nation was reunited again. And we know that people who resist against the coup weren't only Erdogan followers, AKP voters, but from every circle of the society. This referendum results also shows this. You know, everyone against the coup, but in the referendum they voted for different selections or different ballots. It was a historic moment where an ordinary person actually turned into actors, even heroes. And here I want to share about my own experience when I visit the family of a martyr. It was the story. I mean, I was impressed so much. For 2 days, I was so sorry after visit their house because the atmosphere I see in that house. His name was Resul Rüstem. He was just 18 and turned 18 4 days ago before he martyred. His family comes from a low-income family. His father is a servant, hard worker in the school, 5 children. He is the eldest out of 5, and his mother was housewife. And they have really, I mean, their house is really in bad conditions, but when I visited them, they all thank us for being with them, for supporting them. And the father told about the stories about his child. He said he's very angel-hearted boy. He didn't study his lessons, so he only could finish primary school. So he had to work after primary school. Just 4 days, he got an insured job, and his first ID picture was taken just 4 days ago. And when I visited that house, I saw the picture on the table, the ID picture that was taken recently. Maybe if this coup attempt was 1 week before, even he doesn't have a picture. He talked about his stories with his son. what happened that night. He had a migraine, the father, so he took some painkillers and went to sleep, in deep sleep, and he never heard about anything. He was in the living room staying with his mom, the Martri, the Rustam, the 18-year-old boy. And when he heard about the news, he went to the gendarmerie, in front of gendarmerie building, and he was shot there. His uncle was with him. And when they tried to take his body out of the street, out of the gendarmerie building, the soldiers didn't let them to take the body. Maybe he would survive, but he couldn't because they didn't let him. I mean, they shot him and they didn't let the others to help, to call ambulance to help. It was a disaster. I mean, how can I explain this? This is only a monster can plan this, can do this. How a human being can convert something like this. Maybe if you have something, I don't know how to explain this because I never experienced a feeling like that. I never felt something very. I mean, I'm never an enemy to someone in my life. That's strong. That's why it was. Their family, his mom, and the children, and his father, they were like very peaceful, and they were like, okay, the other sons, because they have 3 sons, 2 daughters, and he's the eldest, and he said, the other 2 sons and my daughters, they all may be martyrs for my country, because you can live without your children, but you can't live without your hometown. And we all cried there. I mean, we have many examples of this, but even from the low-educated families, low-educated people, you are very surprised when you hear these sentences, when you hear their loyalty to their own country, and that moment you understand that this is not something learned, but this is something inside your heart. This is something God-given. And Turkish people, I think, has this strongly in their heart. Again, I think the Egypt case and the Syria case was a good example in front of them. So after this experience, people saw this, leaving the streets in bad conditions, when they lose their honor. And being a human is very important, and I mean to have the honor all the time. So they went to streets. I mean, it was a real heroic night. I mean, later you're gonna see the video, and you're gonna experience some part of it. But unfortunately, we are here, we are in US, and we have been in Europe, but we see this, and in this Western media, 15th of July was underestimated, and they saw this national resistance just a struggle between Erdogan supporters and soldiers. And these news are not released by tabloids, but mainstream prestigious media, right and left-wing newspapers. So this made a wound in the heart of Turkish people. Western democratic states, too late. They were too late to give any reactions, any condemnation. They waited until it fails. Now, in Turkish public opinion, the West is perceived as counterfeiter. This was so embarrassing. Being united against the coup showed that there is not a real political tension or conflict between Turkish people. They all together created the spirit of July 15th. Of course, we know that I don't want to be optimistic about this. I know that there will be always political dispute, tensions between the people of Turkey, but this political struggle will continue and from time to time rise and decline, but this will make the productivity, I believe this makes the country more productive, but this doesn't mean that Turkish people are so different from each other, and they believe the independence. And people learn to rely on each other that night. With all its diversity, Turkish society has realized that they must rebuild the state and country. People are frightened because of the terror and because of something that is unidentified for them for that night, who is going to govern them, what is going to happen next day. When I talked to some of the veterans, they told me, I mean, he was, for example, for instance, he was with his daughter, 17 years old daughter. He and his daughter didn't run back, didn't escape, because he thought that I can die that night, it's okay, but if we leave the next day, and if the coup is successful, what is going to happen? What kind of lives are waiting for us? What kind of Turkey we are going to face in the next day? This was the question mark. So we prefer to be that instead of living in the country, in the BAU statement in the BAU country. It was the moment, I think, for the people that was in the streets that night, where the hero inside of the ordinary man was revealed. Because we witnessed that people told, even after 1 year later the coup attempt, they still say the same things, but unfortunately they won't be the same person before the 15th of July. They won't survive their lives before. For example, later you're gonna listen, Tayyip is one of the veterans of us, and he stayed at hospital for 6 months. Am I wrong? For 6 months, and he's going to tell his physical things that changed for him. He's not the same guy like 1 year ago. He will never be the same guy. For the whole nation, we will never be the same people before the July 15th. We had a great experience, and we want you to feel us a little bit even. But you know this experience from 11th September case, so you may understand us if you want. If you want to understand, your ears will be open and your heart will be opened. I believe this. As the Latin phrase calls us from the past centuries, vox populi, vox Dei. I mean, that's the voice of the people is the voice of God. And we are sure that Turkish people never desire tyranny. I would like to thank you all for your participation, for your listening to us, and my special thanks to you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for this detailed and heartfelt account of your experience and what you witnessed with all the people who have been hurt by this event. Now we're going to go to the video. Thank you very much.
Kendi halkına silah tuttu, tanklar, şehitlerin meydanlarına sürüldü. Halk üzerine bombalar ve kurşunlar yağdırıldı. bahseden şer odakları bununla da getirildi. Halkın oylarıyla seçilmiş Cumhurbaşkanımız Recep Tayyip Erdoğan'ın Marmaris'te kaldığı oteli alçakça saldırıyla ateş altına aldı. Kimse neler olup bittiğini anlamamıştı henüz. Yolunda gitmeyen bir şeyler vardı.
Milletimizi, illerimizin meydanlarına davet ediyorum, havalimanlarına davet ediyorum ve milletçe meydanlarda, havalimanında toplanalım ve bunların o azınlık grubu tanklarıyla, toplarıyla gelsinler, ne yapacaklarsa halkı orada yapsınlar. Halkın gücünün üstünde bir güç ben tanımadım bugüne kadar.
Bu çağrıyla beraber millet Türkiye'nin dört bir yanında sokaklara, meydanlara, havalimanlarına, şehirlerin, kasabaların kilit noktalarına akın etti. Millet, Cumhurbaşkanımızdan mesajı almış ve darbeye karşı etten bir duvar örmüştü adeta. Kısa sürede tankların ve silahlı teröristlerin kuşatmaya çalıştığı sokaklara onlarcası, yüzlercesi, binlercesi canını içe sayan barikat kurdu. Cumhuriyet'in başkenti Ankara, ağır bir bombardıman altında cayır cayır yanarken Fethiye şehri İstanbul, Boğaziçi Köprüsü'nde fatihleriyle yine yeni bir destan yazdı bu gece. Silah ve top mermisiyle saldırıyorlardı. Acımasız saldırılar bununla da kalmadı. Hainler havadan açılan ateşle halkın direncini kırmaya çalıştı. Ama bilmiyor vatan hainleri canını içe sayarak tankların önünde duran bu isimsiz kahramanların iman gücünün kırılamayacağını ve bilmiyorlardı. Tank ve silahlar karşısında silahsız, sadece iman gücüyle duran ve vatan müdafası için, şehit olmak için dinle duran milletin inancının onlar için nelere mal olabileceğini. Tüm bunlar yaşanırken ve kurşun kaldırılırken geceye Boğaz, mağrur ve mahkum bir şekilde bekledi. Büyük bir sessizlikle kahramanların yazacağı destansı bir geceye tanıklık ederken bekledi. Ve millet köprüye adını, bağımsızlık mücadelesi için çıktığı bu yolda kanını, canını feda ederek verdi. Gözünü kırpmadan ve ufak bir şüphe duymadan durmak, geri adım atmak, bırakıp kaçmak yoktu millet için. Halk, demokrasiye ve kendi iradesine sahip çıkmak için hesap soruyordu. İhanet kabul edilemezdi ve dimdik durmak zamanıydı şimdi. Yeni geldi tankların üzerine gittiler, yeni geldi kazmayla kürekle vatanı müdafaa etmek istediler. Silaha gerek yoktu. Üzerlerindeki tişörtler bile kalkamadı o gece. Kimi darbe girişimine engel olmak için Tanrı'daki mahsulünü ateşe verdi. Kimi traktörü alıp üzerine sürdü hainin. Akıncı hava üstünde gazi olan bir vatandaşımız ihaneti anlamlandıramıyor ve şöyle tarif ediyor. Sen benim kardeşim değil misin? Vurma diyorum işte. Neden hala vuruyorsun? Emekli bir binbaşı oğullarıyla beraber gitti meydanlara. Namazlarını sıkılıp evden ayrıldık. Bu gece biz bu meydana şehit olmak için gittik diyordu. Bunu bana neden yapıyorsun? Seni ben doğurdum diyen analar şehit olmak adına gitti meydanlara. Güçlerimizle. Kimse toprakların çocuklarını başkalarıyla karıştırmasın diye sesleniyordu bir diğeri. Analar, vatan bizim vatanımız, hainlere karşı durmalıyız dedi. Kol kola verip iş makinelerini kullanarak konu komşuyu meydanlara taşıdı. Onun işte Rus kalkışmasına dair o kadar çok kahramanlık hikayesi vardı ki anlatılacak. Onun işte müzgerisi verilen mücadelede bir Çanakkale ruhu, bir kurtuluş münafası ruhu taşıyordu bizim kahramanlarımız.
Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the fact that the subtitles that in English that are part of this program didn't work too well with us today. However, I think that even for those of us who do not speak Turkish, the images are quite eloquent. And I think again, as it's been said time and again this afternoon, that it is quite obvious, as this footage testifies, that there was a spontaneous and massive popular resistance to this threat to the democratic institutions. These were not friends of the government, these were friends of democracy. And I think that's a huge distinction that I think it's important to make in the case of Turkey, as in the case of the United States, should we ever one day come to that, or any other country. I think these images underscore what we've been discussing and what's been analyzed this afternoon. And with that, we would like to continue with our testimonials. This gentleman, please, would you like to come here and tell us about your story?
Merhabalar öncelikle. Ben 15 Temmuz gazisi Tayyip Ayvalioglu köprünün gazilerinden. Biz 15 Temmuz gecesi köprüye annemizden, babamızdan herhalde kalarak çıktık. Böyle bir şey nasip oldu. Daha sonrasında anne ve babamdan izin aldıktan sonra kuzenimle birlikte koşa koşa Cumhurbaşkanlığı konusuna gittik.
I would like to first say hello to everyone, and I would like to share my experience with you on the night of 15th of July. We got permission from our parents, along with my cousin, and we went to defend our country and to our democracy, and we went to the residency of our president.
Ve ilk köprüye giden bizim gruptu. Köprüye giderken Allah-u Ekber binalarıyla gidiyorduk. Ben annemden babamdan herhalde kalmıştım. Abdestimi de almıştım o sırada. İçimde hiçbir korku yoktu. Biz oraya 3 şey için yaşıyoruz zaten. Vatan için, bayrak için ve namusumuz için ve vatanımıza, bayrağımıza aşık olduğumuz için köprüye koşa koşa gittik.
So we had left the house knowing that we might have not come back. So we did say our farewells to our parents. And as we were going towards the bridge to interfere with what was going on, we knew how critical the situation was.
Köprüye yaklaştığımızda hainler ateş etmeye başladı. Ve biraz daha gişelerin altına yaklaşırken tankla ateşlediler.
And there were three things that were very important for us. That one of them is pride, one of them is honor, and the other one is freedom. And while we were going there, they started to attack us. The traitors started to attack us.
Elimizde sadece bayraklar vardı ve bu hainler bunu görüyordu. Arkamıza da pusu kurmuşlar. Bizi yaylım ateşine aldılar ve o sırada arkadan vuruldum.
And while we were there, we only had our flags. We didn't have any weapons. We weren't armed. We were just heading towards that way. And there was another group of traitors who were ready to attack us from behind. So we were under crossfire, and I was shot from my back.
Yani kuzenimin söylediği, beraber bir kuzenimdi. Videoda da görürsünüz zaten. Ambulansa bindirilirken gülüyordum ben. Bağırıyordum ve gülüyordum. Çünkü ben oraya ülkem için çıkmıştım. Şehit olmaya çıkmıştım ben oraya. Ya bunu isteyerek gidip de böyle bir şeyin olması çok onur verici, gurur verici bir şey. Çünkü orada ülkem için vuruyorum. Bizim sadece topraklarımız Türkiye, başka bir ülkemiz yok. Her zaman da bunu yine de olsa yine de gideceğim inşallah.
And because this was a very important cause, we were fighting. We were there for our country, and if it was to happen again, and you will see me and my cousin in the video, we were together, and even while I was being carried to the ambulance, I was laughing, I was smiling, because I was happy, I was pleased that I was fighting for my country. I did it for our country. So if this was to happen again, I would no doubt put myself out there.
Ben bunları anlatırken her zaman terliyorum. Çünkü terlememin sebebi sadece bu konuda oluyor. Yani o şehitlerimiz aklımıza geliyor ve benim hastanedeyken yanımda Çengelköy'den bir abimiz şehit oldu. Beni orada canlı canlı dikerlerken orada acımı unuttum. Gözümün önünde şehit oldu vatan için.
And while we were in the hospital and while they were stitching my wounds, there was another friend of ours, another citizen, who was shot and who died in front of my eyes. So seeing that made me forget my pain.
Bu FETÖ terör örgütü o kadar sinsi ve alçak bir örgüt ki Burak abimizin de dediği gibi yok hastane imamı, medya imamı ve hastanede bana FETÖ'cü doktor denk geliyor ve bana orada canlı canlı dikiyor ve 4,5 saat bekletti beni orada.
And you know, as Mr. Kuntay said as well, there's so many varieties. There are so in every level of the society. And while I was in the hospital, I was waited. They made me wait for 4.5 hours because one of the doctors were from the Gülen.
Ve şu an o doktor Türkiye Devleti içeride Cumhurbaşkanımıza söyledim ve şu an
And I had
gerekli en ağır cezayı alıyor.
this information with our president, and according to the law, he was locked in. Well, he's going to get he's going to get what he deserves in terms of legal
6
actions.
aylık bir hastane dönemim oldu. 4 tane operasyon geçirdim ve bir tane daha operasyonum var. Burada hastanede çektiklerimiz inşallah günahlarımıza kefaret olur. Biz bu inançla çıktığımız için hiçbir şekilde üzülmedim, bir şey yapmadım. Sadece acılarımı çektim, günahlarımıza kefaret olacak dedik. İnşallah da öyle olmuştur. Herkese çok teşekkür ediyorum geldiği için. Bahcesehir Üniversitesi'ne teşekkür ediyorum. Global Policy Institute'sine teşekkür ediyorum. Ayrıca Burak Kuntay abimi yeni tanıdım. Duygularıma tercüman oldu. Burada GPS'ten açıp dediğim gibi 2 saatte bu FETÖ'nün başı orada. Yani gerekli makamlar inşallah Amerika gerekli makamlar bunun gereğini yapacaktır ve gereği iadesini yapacaktır inşallah. Çok teşekkür ediyorum.
And I would like to, you see me sweating here, and this is the only time that happens to me when I talk about this issue that I turn into this, but I always comforted myself by thinking that all these sufferings, all the pain that I've gone through, the 6 months that I was hospitalized, that I had 4 operations and I have 1 more remaining, I said to myself, these sufferings will be worth it. They will make up for all the bad things that we may have done or all the sins that we may have committed. And I've met Mr. Kuntay today, very recently, and I thank him for all the things that he shared, because he was literally our voice in terms of how we felt and what happened. And the fact that he opened the GPS, the navigation, and showed how far Gülen is in terms of where we are right now. And I just hope that the American authorities could take action, the necessary action that needs to be done. So I thank you all. I thank the university for giving us this opportunity.
Serdar Kilic
And I would like to thank Ambassador Mr. Kilic for his presence.
Podium, our last facility, not insignificant participant, so that she can give us her own account.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's not easy for me to speak after Tayyip, and I know that you have heard enough since the beginning of the sessions. So I will try my best to keep my conversation short. I would like to thank the organizers for such a timely event, and thank you all for coming here today. On the night of July 15, I was returning from London, where I was to attend Farnborough Air Show, and I wasn't expecting an air show to wait me back at home. And that wasn't fun at all this time. I live in Üsküdar, a district of Istanbul, on the Asian side of the city. My apartment is just 10 minutes away from the Bosphorus Bridge. And I arrived home just 15 minutes before the bridge was cut off by tanks and soldiers. At first, we all thought that it was about an intelligence about the possible terrorist attack, and the soldiers were just taking precautions. We happened to be right at the end about a terrorist attack, but in a different way. When I heard a TV news presenter announcing a military coup on Turkish national TV channel, TRT, I was alone in my apartment. And to be honest, I was scared. I called my father, he lives in Izmir, a western city of Turkey. I called my father and asked him if he heard about the news and said that the army is taking over the governance. My father responded me by saying, "Have you ever heard such a military coup? This is not a coup." And he hung up the phone. An unbelievable guy. There were fighter jets over my apartment, and they were trying to break the resistance of the people against the coup with sonic booms created by low altitude flights. And each and every sound, I was quite sure that they just bombed the building next to me. And believe me, it was nothing like to be in a Hollywood movie. And when I called my father, I was hoping him to tell me that everything's gonna be okay at the end, and or at least something that made me feel less worried about the issue. But he didn't. As an old man experienced with the previous military coups in Turkey, he explained me later that if the coup attempt was in the order of the Turkish armed forces, I would be listening to the chief of general staff on television instead of a frightened TV news presenter. He turned out to be right. It wasn't in the order of the Turkish armed forces, it was just a group of soldiers who attempted to overthrow the government. Thanks to the courage of Turkish people, who had to pay the price with their lives on that night to defend their country and democracy, the coup attempt failed. I'm gonna emotional in this point because there are many sad but great stories from that night about how Turkish people resisted the coup. Of course, it wasn't easy at all, since these soldiers were wearing uniforms, carrying Turkish flags on their shoulders, and these terrorists hidden under the Turkish armed forces uniforms were pointing guns to the people, which they supposed to protect. They were pointing the guns purchased with their tax money, and you know, it's not easy to resist for people in such a place. I just want to share two notes from that night which affected me the most. I want you to see this video first. Yeah. Can you help me to play this? Yes. Just play it. Anyways, she's a journalist, and as a journalist myself, I can tell you that our job is not to get involved, but to observe and share with the public. But I believe when it was about her own country, she couldn't help herself but to resist. She shouts to a soldier inside the tank in this video, which you couldn't see, "I'm ready to die. Are you ready to kill me?" I mean, it's hard to understand to be in a mood like this. And let me just go on. Thank you. Tayyip Ayvalioglu, he martyrized in Çengelköy near the Bosphorus Bridge. He was married with 3 kids. He posted this photo on Twitter just before he lost his life, saying that if I die, remember me like this, you wouldn't feel sad. I think he was trying to create a curative speech for the ones will be left aside. For the last couple of weeks, I was working on a report published by, to be published by the Center for Policy Studies about the July 15 coup attempts. We have collected the information the past year's trials about the incident. And, you know, Turkey has failed to convince its allies on this. And Mr. Jeffrey earlier said that the Obama administration was slow to act, but I hope Mr. Trump's administration will be able to work as fast as he tweets about different issues. For many around the world, this was the first time they have heard about the Gülenist terror group, known as FETÖ in short in Turkey. It has functioned as a criminal enterprise for decades in Turkey under the leadership of Fethullah Gülen, who has lived in Pennsylvania that we discussed before since 1999. The network eventually included hundreds of schools around the world, and Mr. Phares said the US was finding Fethullah Gülen organization as an extremist group about a decade ago. But considering the situation right now, I believe it fails to be convincing because his charter schools in the US became one of the main funding sources of the illicit organization. In its strictly hierarchical structure, Gülen is the ultimate leader of FETÖ. He's known to have a say almost all steps taken through his micromanagement. I don't divide this too much. Yeah. The group was successful in infiltrating public positions, including the police, judiciary, military, education, financial sector, and media over decades, as it was a call made by Gülen to establish a state within a state, or what has to be come to know as parallel structure. Key figures in the hierarchical structure, which starts with Gülen and goes down to the local figures, were able to hide their true faces and only acted upon receiving orders from the person who will be in charge of the duty. Just like the cells of a typical terrorist group, FETÖ's operatives lay dormant until they were needed, waiting for years and sometimes decades until they were called on to perform their duties. FETÖ's member base had gone up to hundreds of thousands over the years, with members in almost all levels of state institutions. This is why the numbers of dismissals, when the government began to take action against the parallel structure members, seemed so large. Prior to coup attempts, media reports suggested that there was a strong possibility that Gülenists in the Turkish armed forces would be dismissed in the Supreme Military Council meeting in August 2016. After July 15, Chief of General Staff, General Hulusi Akar, also said in his testimony that the Council's meeting was the main motivation behind the coup attempt. Akar was forcefully detained by Turkish officers at his post in the General Staff headquarters during the attempt. He was brought to Akıncıyer base, which was being used as the headquarters for the coup plotters. Akar said in his testimony to prosecutors that coup plotters tried to make him speak to Gülen. He said Brigadier General Hakan Evrim said that he could get me in touch with their opinion leader Fethullah Gülen if I wanted. Levent Türkan. He was an AD to Chief of General Staff, Hulusi Akar. He confessed that he was a member of FETÖ, and he was notified of a planned coup 2 days before it took place. He said FETÖ was behind the July 15 coup attempt, and he was assigned to be a part of the team to kidnap Akar. Ali Emre Eral. He was the first to confess in the main trial of the coup attempt. The captain was stationed in the operations department of the Office of the Chief of General Staff as Pucic took over the premises and kidnapped Akar and other generals opposing the coup. He said he was first recruited by FETÖ in 2001 during his freshman year at military school. According to Eral, he regularly attended meetings of the terrorist group Like other officers tied to the group, he was assigned to an elder brother who was a former civil servant. Elder brother is a term used for civilian FETÖ members who command the group's infiltrators in the army and other institutions. During the hearing, Eraz said to the court, "You will do what your superiors ordered tomorrow," recounting what his elder brothers told him one day before the coup. Eraz said it was a strange phrase to use, asserting that he was supposed to comply with the orders with his superiors anyway as a military officer. When questioned, Eraz's elder brother told him he would receive a confidential order, claiming that he realized it was about the coup only on the actual day of July 15th. Mr. Majid. He was the pilot who bombed the presidential palace complex in Ankara on the night of the coup attempt. He admitted in his testimony that he knows that FETÖ was behind the coup attempt and that he hit the complex on purpose. Majid told investigators that he received orders from civilians affiliated with FETÖ. The prime suspect, which our ambassador mentioned in his speech at the beginning of the conference. FETÖ's type 5 civilian imams who headed the coup attempt were caught on camera at Akıncı Air Base in Ankara. Adil Öksüz was a lecturer in Sakarya University. He is accused of being FETÖ's imam in charge of the Air Force and being one of the masterminds of the July 15 coup attempt. Öksüz was one of the mysterious civilians at the Akıncı Air Base occupied with plotters of the coup attempt. He was captured near the base on the night of the coup and released on July 18 after his hearing at Sincan Court. The judge who freed Öksüz, Çetin Sönmez, was then arrested. In his testimony, Sönmez confessed that he was in contact with FETÖ, proving that how important it is to be in the state institutions for this group. Contacting FETÖ when he was a university student, and he was the elder brother of students at the police college as a civilian in 1988. Testimonies from officers involved in the coup attempt point to Öksüz is the man who worked with generals to plan the coup and ordered its execution after receiving approval from Gülen. One of the generals, Brigadier General Halil İbrahim Yıldız, said that Öksüz was the man who organized the coup with generals in a villa in Ankara. According to his testimony, Öksüz met generals involved in the coup attempt days before July 15 and arranged plans to seize power. After that, Öksüz traveled to the US to meet with Gülen, and after Gülen gave the green light to plans on July 13th, the coup plot was executed. Despite being a lecturer with no formal appointments or relatives abroad, Öksüz was a frequent traveler, made more than 100 trips abroad between 2002 to 2016, mostly to the US, according to flight records. About 1 month before the coup attempt, he flew to the US with his wife and 3 children and returned to Turkey alone a few days later. On July 11, he went to New York again. He returned to Istanbul 2 days before the coup attempt on July 13. Security forces found him near Akıncı Air Base. In his testimony, he told the court in Ankara that he was near the base to visit an empty plot of land he was planning to buy and was taken to the base by military officers who had detained him. The guy is just kidding. I'm sorry. Referred to as the black box of FETÖ, Öksüz reportedly acts as the imam of the Air Force and is a point man of Gülen who relayed his instructions to followers in the army. A recently serviced annotated photo of Öksüz shows him sitting in front of the Gülen in the latter's residence in Pennsylvania. The first one is in Pennsylvania, the second one is in Turkey when Fethullah Gülen was still living in Turkey. And for last, Kemal Batmaz. Kemal Batmaz was on the same flight with Adil Öksüz to travel the US to get the approval of Gülen. The Ankara Chief Public Prosecutors investigating the July 15 coup plot announced that there was another FETÖ member in the Akıncı base who was captured shortly after the coup attempt. He's arrested now. Batmaz was captured on security camera footage released by Turkish media outlets, walking freely around the Akıncı base in Ankara, conversing with officers who joined the coup. More footage shows Batmaz accompanying Öksüz at Istanbul's Atatürk airport as the two returned from the US 2 days before the coup attempt. They claimed that they didn't know each other. I'm sorry. Hakan Evrim is a coup plotter in the Akıncı base. Adres sözleşti. I'm sorry. Yeah, that's my mistake. Prosecutors say Öksüz and Batmaz flew to the US where FETÖ leader Gülenliyiz on July 11, confirming allegations that Öksüz went to Gdansk, Pennsylvania residence to get his approval for the coup attempt. And there are many different trips that they done together to the US. I'm not gonna go into details. And these were just some examples of that night. And there were also camera footage of technicians who tried to cut the communication channels on that night in TürkSat, in TRT, in different TV channels. And they were all linked to and used to work for different Gülen's companies. And these were just a few points that I would like to mention from our report. It's going to be published on July 15, and I would like to share it with all of you. And thank you for listening.
Thank you very much for adding so much texture to this story. Now we attach, names, faces to names. We kind of have a better idea, and I hope this is illuminating for our audience here about the fact that this is not just rumors, there's evidence. That's what we like here, evidence, facts. So the facts, I suppose, speak for themselves. I would like to thank all of you very much for providing to us all your accounts. I do realize we're really out of time here, and with that, I would like to thank everybody for attending this event, which was rich in texture, detail, crisp analysis. I would like to thank the July 15th Foundation for working with us in the organization of this event. I would like to thank all my colleagues here. I would like to thank Denise and Izel, my good colleagues at GPI who worked tirelessly to put all this together. My good friend Ibrahim here, who's helping us with the technical stuff. And again, on behalf of the Global Policy Institute and BAU International University, I thank you very much for being here today. And Mr. Ambassador, again, thank you for spending so much time with us.